privilege and recognition of guests. The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is great to be back here on Friday morning. I always feel Friday we're moving a little bit more slowly because we go late on Thursday night, but we're here and we all look bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, so that's good, and I expect another good day of debate, so welcome to my colleagues and all of those who are watching at home. My welcomes will be brief this morning, Mr. Speaker. I would like to offer my congratulations, and it was nice to see Pat Duffy in The Guardian today with the St. Patrick's Ancestral Cemetery restoration project in Fort Augustus. And as hard as it was to see Pat wearing that Toronto Maple Leafs hat, Mr. Speaker, I was supportive very much of the work that the community is doing out there to restore that important part of history, and something we all should be always mindful of in here is that the protection of our history is a great way to support and indicate how we plan to move forward as a province. So the best of luck, and if you can, donate to that important program. I wanted to also offer, Mr. Speaker, my belated congratulations to David Dowling for winning the Paul McDonald Driving Award on Saturday at Red Shores. Mr. Speaker, David's been having an exceptional year at the Red Shores, both in Charlottetown and Summerside and across the region. He spends a lot of time out my way now at Windermere Farms on the Colville Road with Earl Watts and the crew out there. And even though it's been a difficult year with COVID and we haven't been able to get out and watch as much in-person racing, it's hard to imagine in my memory, Mr. Speaker, a better year of racing start to finish. The racing has been ultra competitive. It's been exceptional, and the wager has been relatively strong, all things considered. So congratulations to all who continue to have a good year. And finally, Mr. Speaker, just a proud dad moment for me. My son Jake will be the Spin Time DJ on Main Street on CBC today, and of course I'm immensely proud of all of our three kids. Jake has given us lots of reasons to be proud, and I'm just curious to tune in and see where his musical tastes lie today. I know the roots of his musical taste because he was infiltrated with a lot of country music and East Coast music in the car with me over the years, and I'm interested to see where his palate is now from a musical perspective, Mr. Speaker. But I look forward to that, and tune in at about 5:30 or so if you can. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and welcome back for the conclusion of the third week of the sitting, and it's been a busy and very productive one, and largely amicable, and I'm grateful for that, and I look forward to more constructive debates. We had a great debate last night on the Election Age Act and differing opinions, but it's a very interesting debate, and I enjoyed it very much, and I look forward to more of that. A couple of things going on in a community in District 17. We have a lot of strong and vibrant communities in District 17, and one of them is Clyde River, and they're doing a couple of things this Christmas season in line with all of the changes that we've had to adapt to relating to COVID. And they're inviting, Clyde River and Dunedin are inviting people who live in that area to light up their houses with Christmas lights, and they're going to be giving out prizes in December, and there's prizes for the best overall, the most creative and the most outlandish. So I'm going to make sure I make a little detour there as I go home through Clyde River and see what's going on. There's no entry form required. People just put their lights up, and you'll see the results of that on the community website later on in December. Also in Clyde River, and the Premier noted Pat Murphy in Fort Augustus doing work with the cemetery there, and the cemeteries around this province are real emblems of the history of every community. And in Clyde River this year, the History Committee there, and they've had, for many, many years, they've put on a lecture series. Most of those lectures related to the history of Clyde River and the area, and they're very good. I've been to a couple of them. Very well attended, beautifully presented in the community hall there, the old school in Clyde River. But this year, of course, they can't do that. So they're actually doing an online series on cemeteries, the cemetery stories of Clyde River and the area. And it's going to be an online course. It's going to be available, I think, starting in November, and it will go on till next year. And it's all about building awareness of the community in which you live through understanding the people who are buried there, and of course those are the people who built the community. So I think it's a beautiful way, a creative way of maintaining that lecture series, which is all about history and connection to your community, doing that safely during COVID, and celebrating the cemetery, which is in so many PEI communities a centerpiece of who we are. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and as always, it's a pleasure to rise and say hello to everyone back in the District of Evangeline Musqueam and wish them a wonderful weekend. I can't be undone by the Premier he promoted some meat pies in his district earlier this week. I must do that in mine. My two sons, Chris and Jonathan, run Cook's Corner, and they make meat pies every second day, so they're the best around if anybody wants to drop by and skip some. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to draw attention to an activity in my district this weekend, the Festival de Fête, which is to begin the first of their 4 activities on this weekend in Abrams Village. On Sunday at 2 p.m., Josie Boudreau and the group Maz will present their Christmas show. Also, I'd like to say thank you to the many healthcare workers and those in the public health nursing for their efforts in recent days. When there was a possible outbreak, sites announced earlier this week, there was great concern, but it appears everyone impacted has been followed up with or tested, and we have not seen any new cases from it. This is great news to many islanders, and I just want to thank you to all involved in contact tracing and testing for their hard work on behalf of all islanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A pleasure to rise here and welcome my colleagues across the way and all around, and also everyone watching from District 18 Rustico Emerald. And today's a very special day, Mr. Speaker. It's my wife Karen Trigger's birthday today, so I wanted to wish her a happy birthday. She's a great lady. She's an industrial engineer, and so she's running our web business. She's now a web designer and developer, and of course a fantastic mother. And I just want to thank her for all that she does for our family, and especially for me when I'm in here and you know, can't contribute as much as I normally do. And Mr. Speaker, I'm really looking forward, and I know she is too, to February when we start the sittings here and we don't always have those evening hours. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in the House today and say hello to everyone watching at home, particularly those watching from District 23, Tyne Valley Sherbrooke. Even if you haven't been in Tyne Valley recently, you probably saw some of the news coverage that shows the progress that's being made on the new rink in Tyne Valley, which is really exciting. It's wonderful to see, and we're looking forward to that rink being completed. I want to also highlight that the community has a portion to pay for that rink, so we have wonderful federal and provincial support for the project, but the community is continuing to fundraise, so I wanted to highlight a couple of fundraisers coming up. So there is a paint party happening on December 5th at the Tyne Valley Fire Hall, so registration is required for that, but if you'd like to participate, can look into that. As well, Chase the Ace is going to be starting at the Tyne Valley Fire Hall very soon, and they've committed to sending their portion of the proceeds for a full year to the Tyne Valley Rink Rebuild Fund. So that's really exciting, and I encourage everyone to support the Tyne Valley Rink community, or the community who's working to build the funds for their portion of that rebuild. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from O'Leary Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too want to rise and acknowledge the people in O'Leary Inverness that may be watching on Eastlink Internet or on Facebook. Mr. Speaker, I know one avid watcher is a fellow by the name of David Baglow, and not sure if he's a real big fan of our party over here, Mr. Speaker, but he's with the Community Inclusions Group, and he's at the independent housing complex there in O'Leary on North Street, and he sometimes I'll get an email or a text from him. He's ranking me, and I've moved from an F to a D-, I'm told. So I don't know but I do want to give a shout out to David for that, and I also want to comment on the fantastic weather that is out there, and it shows that it's great for our construction workers, Mr. Speaker. And I know the member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke mentioned the Tyne Valley Rink, which isn't her riding, but it's the next building after my riding. And it's great to see that they've got the steel for the roof up. And I also want to mention that the Canadian Potato Museum is also under construction, doing some renovations there. And it just shows that a volunteer group, what they can do if they have the resources to get these construction projects and shovels in the ground, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't take a whole lot if you've got the resources and you've got the will and the effort to do that, Mr. Speaker. And on top of that, I would suggest to anybody, whether in this House or some of these employees of these construction groups, if they want to have a relaxing afternoon or late afternoon, the Santa Claus Parade is going to go ahead in O'Leary again, Mr. Speaker, on Saturday, November 28th, this Saturday coming at 5 p.m. because of COVID rules, there are a few changes, and they are going to have the parade at the CF Willis Racetrack on Gaspé Road. And so I think I'd encourage anybody who wants to come out and check out a Santa Claus parade. I know you like Santa Claus. I know it's a little bit of a drive for you, Mr. Speaker, but you'd certainly be welcome to come to the O'Leary area for that. And I want to congratulate Andrew Avery for his perseverance. He's the rec director in O'Leary in putting together the Santa Claus parade, because I know it was a bit of a challenge this year for him, but I thank him for his efforts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it is a pleasure to rise today. A beautiful day outside. I think we're supposed to get up to 14 degrees, and it's hard to believe at the end of November we have such weather to get out and enjoy this weekend. So, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'd like to say hi to everybody in Mermaid Stratford, and I'd like to give a shout out to Shelley Mulkler-Clark. Shelley's a resident of District 5. She lives in the Mermaid area, and she's an outstanding person in general, but she's also been the leader of the Stratford Guides, Brownies, Sparks, you name it. She's been a leader with them for the last 15 years. And she's one of those exemplary people that even when she doesn't have her children in the organization, she's still a volunteer. And one of the things that they have been doing, I mean, it's hard to meet, especially with kids. And when we first started in October, we always were meeting outside, so fortunately, the town of Stratford let us use the Cotton Park area so that we could do that. But we moved inside, and what they did last night, and I thought this was wonderful, was they had an author and illustrator in, and they had Marlene Bryanton and Leanne Boland come in to talk about Jada's magic wheelchair. And so they shared the book, they talked about it, the kids got to ask lots of questions, and it just kind of opens their sights for what they can do in the future, whether it be an author, be an illustrator, and I just wanted to say hi to Shelley. Thank you for giving the kids that opportunity, and I think that it was a wonderful evening, and not unfortunately, but I am still a leader with the Stratford Guides, and I was here last night, so I didn't get to participate in that. So, but I'm glad that it happened, and it was just a great experience for them all. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise, and before starting to say what I have to say, I just want to point out that I'm not the leader of the opposition, even though I'm wearing this jacket because I forgot my own back home. Anyway.
You look familiar.
So, thank God that he has to spare. I would also like to express my regret that the Victorian Christmas fair that was supposed to happen this weekend got cancelled due to serious concern about COVID, and I don't blame them for cancelling the event, although it's a really sad thing. But I want to point out that Charlottetown downtown is not cancelled. So please, everyone, put on your best mask and go and shop local, eat local, and there's even going to be special entertainment put on by Downtown Inc. This weekend as well. Secondly, of course, I want to reach out to to people in my district who's watching me online, and I think it's really a wonderful feature of technology that they not only can sit home and watch everything like being here in the gallery, but unlike being in the gallery, they can actually communicate directly with me, so in real time, so they can listen to what I'm saying, and if they don't like what I'm saying, they can send me a comment. I can read it right on my phone. So I'm for better or for worse, I'm particularly reaching out to one person who has been following the budget deliberation, John Terrar, that you may all be familiar with. I think he used to work for the government, for the Energy Corporation, or one of those important things. He has been around for a long time, like myself, and he has taken upon himself to listen into every detail of the budget deliberations, and I congratulate him for staying on with it and providing the comments, and I want to give my apologies to him in advance that we unfortunately don't always get the answers to our questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just like to rise. I don't rise too often in the House here during greetings, but I'd like to say hello to everyone in District 22 and just share a little bit of story that I kind of feel represents how a lot of Islanders feel. Recently, the pool in Credit Union Place opened up, the leisure pool, and my youngest, he's 5 years old, overheard me say it. And within 2 seconds of hearing it, he was running down the hall, clothes were flying off, and into the bedroom he went. And within 60 seconds, he was back in front of me, dressed completely ready for the pool. And then recently, on Wednesday, I got home, and the kids were all, "Daddy!" And that's always nice to hear, but they weren't really excited I was home. They were excited that there was a new movie out. So it's just a few touches of these normalcies that I'm getting at that I think represents how all Islanders feel. And, we've got to get out there and safely enjoy the stability that our island jurisdiction and Islanders' sacrifice has earned us. This winter will be a long one, and let's be sure to fit in some well-being time for all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in the House and welcome all of my colleagues back on this Friday. And I would just have to be pointing out, Mr. Speaker, that you are not just invited to one Santa Claus parade. I understand that O'Leary Inverness has a great Santa Claus parade, but I actually have one happening in Summerside tonight, actually. At 6 o'clock, Mr. Speaker, it's a reverse Santa Claus parade. It's going to be starting from Credit Union Place. We weren't sure it was going to be able to go ahead, but a lot of hard work has gone into making it a safe event, and I'd love to see you there, Mr. Speaker, as surely would all of the members of my district. And I will point out that there are a number of great businesses that have gotten off the ground in Summerside lately in the last few months. So if you're out doing your Christmas shopping this weekend, I would encourage you to support some of our innovative local businesses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise this morning to welcome all my colleagues back and to say hi to those in Charlottetown, Victoria Park. I reached out to Heidi Zinn from Discover Charlottetown this week to just kind of, tell her how sorry I was about the way that the Victorian market was going, and hoped that they could, still kind of enjoy their time. And she had mentioned the Facebook page that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition mentioned yesterday to encourage people to shop local. And so this weekend, my son has been asking to decorate for Christmas since Halloween. And so this weekend, I promised him that we could him and my daughter and I would make our gingerbread houses and put up some Christmas decorations and all of that stuff. And so I'm really hoping to be able to drag my homebody kids out, which, the effects of COVID, I know there's a lot of data coming out, and I see it in myself, and I see it in my friends and family that, there is a bit of a burnout going on. And so it's really important that we get out. So it's affecting my kids too. They're getting quite comfortable in our house, and they don't necessarily want to leave, but I am going to drag them out this weekend. And I think once they get out, they'll be pleased. We're going to check out the Confederation Plaza, Victoria Road, to check out the Whoville characters that have been created by Julie Deneff, Becca Griffin, and with some creative support from Becca Vio. And so I look forward to getting out and getting, it's hard to drag yourself out of the house sometimes, Mr. Speaker, but it's important to do nonetheless. So I look forward to the debate today, and hope everyone has a great day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to say hello to everyone watching from District 27, Tignish Palmer Road, especially those who are watching from the Tignish Seniors Home. And I guess I have to follow suit with some of the Christmas events that are happening in Tignish, and there's a house decorating contest with prizes to be won, put on by the town of Tignish, and I'm very happy to see that they're including another category for those outside of Tignish and the surrounding areas, because those people contribute so much to our town. So kudos to the rec director and to the town of Tignish for doing that. Also, Mr. Speaker, it's nice to see that our colleagues help each other out in time of need, and Charlottetown Brighton mentioned the Leader of the Opposition giving him a jacket. And I just want to let the member from Charlottetown Brighton know that if he needs a pair of shoes, I have an extra pair upstairs. Thank you.
Did I miss anyone on the list? Members by statement. The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's wonderful to see the new Tyne Valley rink taking shape. We're all hopeful that this project will be completed by July 2021 in time for the Oyster Festival in the summer. But while the rink is under construction, Mr. Speaker, hockey continues, thanks to the hard work of parents and volunteers of the Tyne Valley Minor Hockey Association, who have worked so hard to make this happen. I want to take a minute to acknowledge all of the board members and volunteers, including Jared Caldwell, President, Justin Noy, Vice President, Mary Gillis, Treasurer, and Nicole DeRoche, Chair of Social Media and Fundraising. Some of you may recognize Nicole from her live online draws on Facebook for the Tyne Valley Minor Hockey. Also, special thanks to Jamie Ellis, past president, who I understand has been leaned on heavily during this challenging time. Tyne Valley Minor Hockey Association has over 200 players in its system who have sadly not had a rink to call home since the fire this past December. However, neighboring associations have been incredible to show their support, and I want to give a shout out to some of the other minor hockey associations who have been so generous to share their rink time. In particular, Doug Dexter and the Summerside and Area Minor Hockey, Jamie Sue Fraser and Evangeline Minor Hockey Association, Brandon Arsenault, Josh Bolter, and the O'Leary Minor Hockey Association, Melissa Williams, Jason Milligan, and Alberton Minor Hockey Association, and Mark McRae, Tish Shea, and the Tignish Minor Hockey Association, along with all the other minor hockey associations across the island that offered support and donated items that were needed to keep the kids playing. Since losing the rink, Tyne Valley Hockey has decided to change its colors to green and yellow, which were popular colors among early Tyne Valley teams in the historic senior hockey team, the Tyne Valley Clover Farmers. This change was inspired by the Rally for the Valley that took place in front of the remains of the old rink, when many old coats and jerseys surfaced with these colors. You can check out these new designs and purchase your own Tyne Valley Tornadoes apparel on their website. Special thanks to Matt McGuire for his hours of work and patience in coming up with these new jersey designs and the thank you badge that's also on them. I want to wish all Tyne Valley's hockey players a fun and successful season, and I look forward to cheering you on in the new rink next year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A government needs to have both a strategic plan and a budget. The strategic plan lays out the direction and goals of the government and guidelines for actions to achieve those goals, while the budget looks at the money needed to support achieving the goals. Budgeting is only one part of the strategic planning process. A capital budget is not a standalone document. Project approvals require homework, business cases that support investment. Among other very important information, the business case would identify the return on investment, a performance measure used to evaluate the effectiveness of an investment or compare the effectiveness of a number of investments. The Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy routinely brags about paving. Statements like, "We like pavement, so let's talk about pavement," draws cheers and desk slamming from his side of the House. I wish he was as enthusiastic about buildings. I wish instead of carving initials in wet pavement, this government was also striving for shiny dedication plates. Dedications proclaiming this building was built to serve islanders with state-of-the-art mental health and addictions treatment, or this building is a home to islanders who matter. I wish this government was striving for that. During the debate on the Election Act, the Minister of Finance pointed out, and rightfully so, that the research had just been tabled an hour before, which didn't give the members a chance to review it. I would liken that to the experience on this side of the House as we talk about the capital budget. We are being asked to make a decision on spending $196 million, and I, for one, I want to make an informed decision.
That is impossible to do when the research hasn't been shared. My daughter is in grade 6. She has to show her work in math to support how she arrived to her answer. If we have that expectation from 11-year-olds, I call on all members to strive to at least reach that standard. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, West Royalty.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to speak today about a very important segment of our population, Islanders who have dementia. Those living with dementia experience struggles that many of us could not understand. It doesn't only have an impact on those experiencing dementia, but it also affects their entire family. There is little things more painful than having a spouse or a parent slowly begin to forget their loved ones. Those suffering with dementia are a vulnerable part of our population, and we must ensure we are offering adequate supports for them and their families. We saw on a federal level the government introduced a national dementia strategy in June of 2019. This strategy was a first of its kind and contained national objectives and common principles to help guide levels of government and the private sector. The plan contained 3 main objectives, and those are dementia prevention, advanced therapies and finding a cure, improving quality of life for those living with dementia and their caregivers. Also in 2018, we saw the former government release a 3-year action plan for seniors. Within the action plan were recommendations to improve dementia care. Unfortunately, we are not seeing the same level of importance being placed on the issue with the current government. Recently, we saw the government put dementia patients in Unit 9 after they emptied the facility for psychiatric services. Once they began facing pressure on the availability of Unit 9, they then decided to rush dementia patients to other units in the hospital, which may have not had secure facilities required. This is not an acceptable way of dealing with our vulnerable population. I've had the opportunity to work with dementia patients for some time now, both at PE Home and through the Alzheimer's Society. I also had a parent who suffered with dementia, so I can attest to the toll it takes on family members. Dementia does not discriminate and can happen to any family. Unlike other diseases, there is little one can do to proactively prevent the onset of dementia. All this being said, it is crucial that we work with our positions as legislatures to do everything we can to support Islanders experiencing dementia and their families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions by members, starting with response to questions taken as noticed. No? For our first question, I'll call on the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The Premier said over and over again that he wants to do politics differently and that he wants to be collaborative. And I have to say, I'm happy to say that I think all of us in this legislature have made improvements in that regard. But collaboration requires the sharing of information, amongst other things. One of the core functions of our Legislative Assembly is to scrutinise government spending. In fact, some would say that that is the core function of the Legislative Assembly, to oversee the spending of taxpayers' dollars. But in order to do this well, we need to have good information on what government is doing with that money. A question to the Premier. Do you agree that a collaborative government should be open and forthcoming with information about how it spends public funds?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question, and I do agree with his lead up to it that I think every person in this legislature since we've gotten here have exhibited a desire to collaborate and to act differently, I think more so than any time in our history, and I think that's a good thing for everybody in here, but it's a good thing for all Islanders as well. The scrutiny of the spending of taxpayers' dollars, I think I would agree, is probably the most critical aspect of what we do in here, and I am trying our best to be as open as we possibly need to get back information, and if there's ways to improve that, Mr. Speaker, I remain open to them.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So during debate on the capital budget over the last few days, Our caucus has been repeatedly asking for that information that the Premier would like to provide us with about the various projects included in the budget. And we've heard the line so often, "We'll get back to you." We've heard that over and over again from the Minister of Finance, who's sitting on the floor representing government for this process. In the past, these requests for information have not always been fulfilled. To the Premier, will your ministers bring all of this information back to the House, or do you expect us to pass a budget without actually knowing fully what's in it?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I think when we deliberate the capital budget or the operational budget in the spring, there's a process that has been a sort of a tradition that has evolved over time, and I think we have to continue to make changes into that and to improve it, as I say. Staff do watch here if there are questions. They're directed by us to get these questions back. We try our hardest to get them back. But once again, Mr. Speaker, I remain open to any good idea that would make it easier for, I don't necessarily think I have to make it easier for you to support the document. I have to give you as much information as you can to make an informed decision, and I'd like to continue to explore ways to do that.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I really appreciate that answer, Premier. Thank you. And one of the traditions surrounding the budget process, scrutiny process, is that it's normal practice for ministers in the House to intervene in the debate to provide more information, because they are the ones who are, of course, most familiar with their files with that department. But over the last few days, with very few exceptions, the government bench has been stubborn in its refusal to provide information, even when they are asked directly. To the Premier, why have your ministers been ignoring our questions, and did you order the ministers to keep quiet and not respond to those questions?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I've been watching for the most part the same deliberations that everybody else in here has been in. What I have been watching is the Finance Minister with her assistant to the Treasury Board, Gordon McFadgen, providing the information from a capital budget perspective, Mr. Speaker. There's been numerous times when there have been interventions from myself included, Mr. Speaker, on questions that, as they pertain, and I think that will continue, Mr. Speaker. We are proud of the document that we have tabled here. It was developed in collaboration with everybody, all the parties in this legislature, Mr. Speaker, and with broad consultation across the province. And I'm proud of it, and I want it to be obviously passed, but I want a comfort level to know that you know what we're doing and why, Mr. Speaker, and I continue to try to be helpful in that regard.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, and the Minister of Finance and Gordon have been doing a fine job. You know, there are two people trying their best to provide us with answers, but it's literally impossible for one minister and one stranger, albeit somebody who works intimately, of course, in Treasury Board, to have all of the answers to these questions, which is why it's so important that the ministers who are present in the room, who have more detail, more knowledge than those two individuals who are trying to carry this themselves, are available for comment. One of the more disturbing developments during the debate on this budget is that on multiple occasions now, the government has used its majority to force through sections of the budget without providing us with the information that we need to do our jobs and to make an informed decision. You've effectively been shutting down debate. I know that the PCs of the past would have been absolutely horrified by that behaviour. A question to the Premier: why are you trying to ram through the budget in this House without proper scrutiny?
Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think we're getting an incredible amount of scrutiny to the budget, Mr. Speaker. I don't know what he refers to as the ramming through. I wasn't in the legislature last night when a vote was held, but I saw members of both parties supporting the carrying of the bill, or of the section, Mr. Speaker. So I don't know if that fits the narrative that the leader is, well, the leader of the third party voted for sure. So, I mean, it's not a ramming through. I wasn't in the legislature when that particular debate was happening, Mr. Speaker, but the capital budget outlines the capital expenditures of the province, Mr. Speaker. I think where there is a little bit of confusion or back and forth, that there are a lot of questions about the operational aspects of a department, Mr. Speaker, that obviously the Minister of the Finance or the Secretary of the Treasury Board couldn't answer within this particular document, but that is why we have opportunities such as this to ask those questions, Mr. Speaker, and by no means are we trying to ram anything through, Mr. Speaker. I'll stay here till the end of time, Mr. Speaker, if that's what the opposition desires, to get this passed and to do good things for PEI, Mr. Speaker. I'm in absolutely no rush to get out of the legislature.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night we heard for the first time that the province is planning to construct 2 or maybe 3 health hubs. When our caucus presented this idea to government, we subsequently committed to build, when they subsequently committed to build rural healthcare hubs, we tabled substantial research on our proposal. And we followed up with more research when there were questions from the third party on exactly what was meant by a rural health hub. Despite repeated questioning last night from our caucus, to which there were no offered interventions, it was impossible to discern what government means by the term health hub. A question to the Minister of Health. The conventional idea of a rural hub incorporates acute care, primary care, diagnostic services, supports for citizens with chronic conditions, and perhaps housing for people who require high-level nursing care needs. Minister, is this what you're talking about?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, currently we're going through a process for our Rural Health Initiative, and part of that process is consultation. We have a survey ongoing right now asking people in communities, particularly rural communities, what services they feel that they require in their communities. Mr. Speaker, every community on PEI is unique to itself. So what we're going through right now is an exercise to ascertain what exact services are required in say, maybe O'Leary, what's required in Montague, what's required in Surrey, what's required in South Shore. So, Mr. Speaker, that's the exercise we're going through right now. And I'm very proud of the work that the department is doing, and I'm excited about the feedback that we're receiving thus far. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm unclear as to why that information couldn't have been shared with us last night when we asked. I also want to note that 2 of these hubs involve new builds. So if there's still consultation ongoing with the community, I'm not sure how you're already moving forward without, you have this idea of exactly what they're going to look like, but you're still doing consultation. So I'm quite confused about that process. We also learned that the implementation of the Electronic Medical Record System, or EMR, will be delayed until March 2022. And that even though the tender has been awarded for this, somehow negotiations continue and the work has not even yet begun. Having an EMR, or a digital record system, that will support patient care across services and over time is a basic expectation of all healthcare professionals and essential to their work. Question to the Minister of Health: how do you expect to recruit and retain doctors to PEI without a functioning, integrated electronic medical record system?
Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I do agree. It can be a challenge to recruit doctors without a functioning EMR. Mr. Speaker, I said here in the House yesterday that since May 2019, we've actually recruited 30 doctors to PEI. But, Mr. Speaker, the completion date or the implementation date of March 2022 is incorrect. Mr. Speaker, we are weeks away from finalizing the contract with the vendor. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, it was slowed down due to COVID. The vendor that we're negotiating with was not willing to take on any new clients at that time, due to the fact that there was travel restrictions. Their technicians couldn't travel from one jurisdiction to another. But, Mr. Speaker, as I said, we're extremely close to signing this contract. The rollout, implementation of the EMR will start early in 2021, and the completion date is expected to be no later than March of 2022. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Mr. Speaker, so what I'm hearing here, what the minister just said, is that the information provided to us last night by the Minister of Finance was incorrect, and there was no intervention offered to correct that information. It makes it very difficult on this side of the House to really have a meaningful conversation about the budget when we can't get answers when we're asking questions and we're getting incorrect information. How do I know what other information is correct or not correct? How do I know? How do I know that? Last night during debate, we were told that the building of the new mental health hospital won't even begin until 2023, with an expected completion date at least 5 years out. Not providing sufficient resources to the master planning team is causing this delay, bringing into question the priority of mental health services for this government. Question to the Minister of Health: how do you expect to recruit and retain doctors and nurses in mental health and addictions, knowing they will have to work in the outdated and unsafe Hillsborough Hospital for at least 5 more years?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the honourable member continues to say that there's only 3 people working on the project. That's the furthest thing from the truth, and when we table the documents, everyone will see the org chart, the detailed information with regards to how many people are working on the project. It's a cross-departmental project as well, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I'm very proud of the work that's being done within Health and Wellness and Health PEI and across other government departments to get this project going. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are over 1,000 housing units owned and operated by the province. But as been pointed out by my colleagues from Charlottetown Belvedere, it's not enough to have a roof over your head. People need a home where they can live and grow and build a community. This is especially important for families with children. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing: what are your plans for including on-site playgrounds as part of housing units currently planned or under construction?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And to the honourable member, I do appreciate that something, I'll be honest myself, that I have not given consideration to, but it's an excellent suggestion, and I would more than welcome the opportunity to have further discussion with any of the honourable members on this. And again, the collaboration, the feedback that we receive, thank you for that suggestion. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my past experience designing housing projects, playgrounds was an essential item. It wasn't even considered not having it. People living in single-family homes usually enjoy access to things like gardens, a terrace, and backyards, which are great and for children. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing: what are your plans to include an outside space as part of new housing units for families?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you very much again, Mr. Speaker. And as I had said previously, I do thank the honourable member for the suggestion. I think one of the things that we do have to remember, Mr. Speaker, is that the units that are under construction, the units of PEI Housing Corporation that currently exist, they are in towns, they are in villages, they're in municipalities that really, for the most part, do have playgrounds, do have park areas and the like. But again, back to the original comment, I think it is something that is very worthwhile to take a look at with new builds and even existing builds, to take a look across the board what park area, what playgrounds are in the vicinity, and if there is not any there, then we should be taking a look at that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the answer. Although I must admit I'm shocked that it isn't part of the basic considerations in your planning and design. Statistically, single-parent households, which are predominantly women, have the highest poverty rate. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing: how are you working with the Minister responsible for the status of women to ensure that needed facilities for children at risk are available in government family housing units.
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And yes, certainly have continuous conversations with the minister responsible for the status of women. But I think that you look at the number of programs, the funding, the increases that we have provided. You look at Blooming House, for example, Mr. Speaker, $120,000, an additional $25,000 to Blooming House under social supports. Also, you look at, that we provide to Anderson House through Family Violence Prevention Services, $680,000. That we do have units right across the province, and I'm not going to go into the details with regard to the location, but even in the West Prince area, Mr. Speaker, that there is a duplex there for women with family who are experiencing family violence. We are always there day and night to provide those services and to provide a roof over their head. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Last week, I asked about the water extraction permit that was approved for the Dunk River, and the Minister of Environment told us that the proclamation of the Water Act will take care of this sort of issue. But, Mr. Speaker, the policies that the minister ignored are not future ones that will come into effect under the Water Act. They're regulations that are already in place now. Question to the Premier: how can Islanders have confidence that this government will properly enforce the Water Act when they're clearly not following the regulations that are in place now?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the question and the passion that she brings to this legislature every day to get results for PEI. Mr. Speaker, as we said in here many times, the issue around water has been a delicate and emotional conversation for sure. We work very, very hard to put in place these parameters and regulations and protocols, Mr. Speaker, to protect our water, and we think the Water Act will strengthen that, Mr. Speaker, and I'm looking forward to its proclamation.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I fear that the Premier didn't hear me. The parameters were already in place on this issue. Ultimately, the Premier is responsible for ensuring his ministers do the work on behalf of Islanders properly. In approving a water extraction permit for the Dunk River this summer, the minister responsible for the protection of water went against policies that are already in place. Question to the Premier: do you condone the decision of the minister to ignore existing water guideline regulations from her own department?
Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the issue around the situation with the Dunk River was a very difficult and challenging one, Mr. Speaker, and we had asked the department to take a look at, because we were in a precarious situation, a near drought situation, we were presented with some options, Mr. Speaker, in terms of in an emergency situation to see if we could have a little relief for the agricultural sector, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we asked the department to explore, Mr. Speaker, and that's how we move forward.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm alarmed. The Water Act is a good piece of legislation, but it will only be effective at protecting water if government properly implements it. Whether it came from the minister or the Premier, this decision seriously undermines this government's credibility when it comes to implementing the Water Act. Question to the Premier: what other water protection policies, what parts of the Water Act will you allow your minister to ignore?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I think this really stems from the conversation that we were having yesterday and previous, and that is that the issue of water can't just be one issue, Mr. Speaker, and it has to be looked at in the context of a bigger plan, Mr. Speaker. I think when you look at the situation like surface irrigation, for example, is that a better option as opposed to offering it through other irrigation opportunities? Is it a little bit easier on an estuary or a watershed, Mr. Speaker, if we do it from underground as opposed to taking from the surface, Mr. Speaker? And I think the conversation has evolved in a good way, Mr. Speaker. I think it needs to continue, but at the same time in this province, there's always a delicate balance. Agriculture is our biggest economic generator. When we have money being generated through our economy, we're able to make the investments in social housing, investments in the economy that need to be made, Mr. Speaker, and there's a delicate balance there. And every day in here, we try to walk along that very delicate balance. It's a difficult one. I don't think we've figured it out yet, Mr. Speaker. I think we're getting closer to it, but I think more conversation and debate is required.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Mr. Speaker, my questions to the Finance Minister today. Mr. Speaker, here in this House and on the street, we've heard a number of stories about Islanders struggling given the circumstances of COVID-19. Islanders who have been laid off, had their hours reduced, had their wages cut, or had their business seasons devastated, needing help heading into what could be a very hard holiday season. Mr. Speaker, we know that holiday times are challenging even at the best of times. And we know that 9 times out of 10 it's related to stress associated with money, or more specifically a lack thereof. Is there anything that the Minister can provide to us today to tell us how we can alleviate some of this pressure?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the question. There have been a number of programs for Islanders, both federally and provincially, and we continue to be there to support Islanders. You know, the CERB was one of them, and the opportunity now to get your EI with 120 hours, both federal programs, but we've had a number of provincial programs as well to ensure that what Islanders need to keep safe and remain safe is there for them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I fully understand, Minister, that there's over $700 million coming into this province from the federal government, and many good programs. But I feel that you have a $60 million contingency fund in the provincial budget. So maybe it's time that we took a look at to get through this next month or even the next 2 months and ensure that community groups like the Lions Clubs and the food banks, who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting at this time of the year, have some sort of package provided to them from the provincial government. It would go a long way in helping school counselors and the non-for-profits that are actually dealing with these situations on a day-to-day basis. Is there anything that this government can do?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we are here continually for Islanders. We've rolled out 13 programs from this province, the most in the country, Honourable Member, and we'll continue to be there for Islanders. We know that the service groups are there. We will do what we can to help them through this, and we've also seen a number of people have mentioned community groups that are actually getting more donations than they had before, Honourable Member, through this COVID time. And I think as Islanders, we work together, we band together, and we look after one another. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'll just inform the minister that, yes, they're getting more donations, Minister, but I can tell you from my area alone, the request for Christmas hamper baskets has doubled this year. So they're going to need more, but they're still going to need more. Besides those hamper baskets, they're going to need to be provided to. The children are going to be home from school now. So we need to ensure that our stress level and our mental health is looked after. But I will credit this government. On the outset of this pandemic, Islanders could access grocery store gift cards. And I thought that was an exceptional program, and we all took advantage of it. And perhaps the Premier can chime in on this. But at very least, could your government reinstate that program for the next 2 months to help some of these families get through this tough time?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. It's a wonderful idea. I'll present that to the Minister of Economic Development and Growth to see what we can do. We are still in a pretty good place when it comes to COVID. Spoke to my daughter in Vancouver last night. Basically have not left their condo since March, and so we are not in that place. She commented on her colleagues saying what a great job we're doing here in PEI, and to implement mandatory masking, which they're still not doing out there. We will do whatever we can, Honourable Member, to ensure the safety of Islanders and to help them get through the holiday season and moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday in the House, we heard from the Minister of Education state he had no concerns whatsoever when it came to learning gaps that Island students may have as a result of online learning they experienced in the spring. I think he called it a non-issue. This was a disappointing response from the minister, as he is ultimately responsible for ensuring that our island students receive high-quality education. He indicated that his department had all the necessary information to ensure gaps did not exist in the education of island students. To quote an August 5th CBC article, the province was not able to gather detailed data on the learning impacts of COVID-19 pandemic last spring. This quote came from an official within the minister's own department. Question to the minister: does the minister still stand by the statement that he had all the information required to determine that gaps did not exist?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the member across really has to get his story straight about what he's actually asking about. So he asked yesterday about assessments and whether I was comfortable that we were assessing students properly to know where they were at. And the answer is yes, we are. It's done every day by our teachers. We know exactly where our students are at, and that is not an issue, and that's what he was asking yesterday. Today, he's asking a different question. He's muddying the waters a little bit, but yeah, indeed, we do know that gaps do exist from the pandemic, and we do know that we need to address them. And Mr. Speaker, the team at the Department of Education is leading the nation when it comes to addressing these gaps. They started in April, as soon as schools were shut down, to identify the key outcomes, compress the curriculum, and make sure that our students this fall are having those gaps addressed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown West Royalty.
Well, the only thing being muddied here is the minister muddying his own department. I mean, there's no standard. It's not being equitably around the entire province. I must say this is a concern to hear the minister repeatedly stand up in the House and state something is not an issue when we hear from others in education, parents, students, that there is gaps because of COVID and the way we learned in the spring, Mr. Speaker. When the return to class plan was released, the province director of English education programs and services told the media that the province was unable to gather detailed data on learning impact resulting from online learning last spring. Question to the minister: when the minister declared this a not issue yesterday, was he aware that his own department publicly stated they didn't have reliable data on this important topic?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. So let's be clear. The department has known from the very beginning that there are definitely gaps. We knew as soon as we had to close schools in the spring and we couldn't teach to the curriculum while the students were at home. We called it at-home learning, not remote learning, because we weren't teaching the curriculum, that there would be gaps. That's why the department immediately started compressing the curriculum, identifying the key outcomes to make sure they can move that forward so those gaps were addressed this fall. And Mr. Speaker, I can't stress this enough. We're pretty much the only jurisdiction in the entire country that did this because of the excellent work in our department. And I just want to commend the teachers again for the great work they're doing in this stressful time. There's not a single jurisdiction across this entire country that are doing any sort of standardized assessments. And Mr. Speaker, Prince Edward Island has the best education system in the country right now. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown West Royalty, your second supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this type of question comes from parents in my district who are nervous and watching their kids in their education falling behind currently because there's no assessment. The online learning plan was very casual at best. Yes, the teachers are doing a good job, but Minister, you need to take control and do something proactive as the Minister to make sure that we get better education outcomes for our students. There's a theme that's developing with this Minister when he faces relevant, important questions in the House. He quickly dismisses the concerns and declares them as not issues. We heard him declare that there was not an issue with the bus and the CUPE situation before. We heard him say the teachers had no concerns, only to hear from many teachers who feel overwhelmed and under-supported. I'm tired of the Minister dismissing concern raised by educators, workers in the school system, students, and parents. Will the Minister please drop the damn excuses and stop dodging the important issues and start addressing the learning gaps in education with the importance they deserve?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I stand behind our experts in the Department of Education. I stand behind the plans they've come up with. I stand behind all the amazing work they've done in the face of an unprecedented pandemic. I stand behind them because they're doing the best work in the country, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we continue to provide supports to our education system, to our teachers, to all the staff that work there, and most importantly, the students, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, when it comes to gaps, I would encourage the member across to have his constituents talk to their teacher of their students and say, my student is struggling and they may have some gaps, and what can we do to address it? That's what I tell any parents that contact me, because our teachers are there on the front lines, they're expert, and frankly, they're doing a really great job. Thank you.
The honourable member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we all know, this past number of months have been exceptionally difficult for our post-secondary students. I've watched as our island students adapted to challenges that COVID has presented to them as they begin their studies in 2020-2021 school year. In particular, students have had to adapt to new methods of learning, new environments, and new challenges. These students have shown resilience at a time when summer employment was not as strong as most seasons, at a time when tuitions have increased, and at a time when high-speed internet is not accessible in many areas of our province. I believe it is fair to say students need financial support now more than ever. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning. Why did you decide not to honour your campaign promise and increase the George Coles bursary?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is a topic that's been broached in the House before. And, Mr. Speaker, I will stand behind firmly the supports that we offer students on this island. I think that, and I'll get these numbers for the member as well, that there's a huge percentage, especially the low and middle income student islanders, Mr. Speaker, that can have their entire tuition covered right now under our current programs. And, Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of Education, I take my position really seriously in terms of being financially prudent and making sure we help everybody. And, Mr. Speaker, I think that's exactly what we're doing right now.
The honourable member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, thank you to the former Liberal government for making over 1,000 students able to go to university for free. Mr. Speaker, as I said at the top of my questions, it's very difficult for our island post-secondary students. They've seen job opportunities dry up. They're experiencing more economic hardship than most post-secondary students typically encounter. So government has the ability to help these students, and it's important that they act on this important issue and follow through on an election promise. Mr. Speaker,
Island Advantage Bursary.
Will the minister commit to offering additional financial support to island students attending post-secondary this fall, as promised?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
So, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to give the member across a few facts about the Island Advantage bursary, which is a low and middle income bursary. And the budget for 2021 actually increased by $700,000 for a total, Mr. Speaker, of $2 million. An average student receives approximately $1,900. Last year, it was only $1,692, Mr. Speaker, a significant increase. And as of October 30th, 2020, there were 977 island students entitled to that, 756 at UPEI, 220 at Holland College, and one at College de Lille. And Mr. Speaker, interim payments of approximately $1.5 million have been dispersed by November 6, 2020. So, Mr. Speaker, we're definitely stepping up. We're supporting students. And, Mr. Speaker, I hear the member coming across, but frankly, I haven't had a single student complain to me about this issue.
The honourable member from Tignish, Palmer Road, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm asking these questions on behalf of a constituent who emailed the minister on Monday of this week. So he did hear from somebody. Well, he heard from one of my constituents, and I have the email. I was copying on it. So, Mr. Speaker, the minister is talking about income-based bursaries. I'm talking about the George Coles bursary, the one that was promised during the last election by this government. Mr. Speaker, many students who are facing financial hardships, they were promised an increase would go a long way in taking the financial stress off their shoulders. We also have many Islanders who seek opportunities not offered in our province, Mr. Speaker, but these individuals would be excluded from the George Coles bursary. This could be an individual who's taken chemical engineering, for instance, with the intention to return to PEI for work. So, Minister, will your government look at extending the George Coles bursary to students who have no choice but to leave PEI to gain a degree that's not offered here in Prince Edward Island?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the intent of the George Cole bursary, I believe, is to help island students study, and really we want them to study on Prince Edward Island. And yes, do I understand that there are degrees that are not offered on PEI? Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. And so, you know, this is something we will consider again, Mr. Speaker. I believe it's important to be financially prudent, Mr. Speaker, and we've heard the Leader of the Opposition talk about this magic money faucet, and maybe the member from Tignish Palmer Road has a magic money faucet of his own, I don't know. But Mr. Speaker, we will look into this again, and we'll assess it. We'll look at the cost and see if it's feasible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Morell-Donagh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last night in capital estimates we heard a few more details and more funding for the Rural Healthcare Hub initiative that this government has talked about. Question to the Health Minister, Mr. Speaker. These hubs should be about expanding accessibility for important healthcare services. Mr. Speaker, I'm really excited about the possibility of a rural healthcare hub coming to the North Shore of PEI. Minister, what consultation process have you done in Eastern PEI?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, as I alluded to earlier here today, we currently have an online survey that we're doing across the island. Mr. Speaker, that's also available in hard copy if an individual so requests. We're also doing a survey for providers. We have targeted focus groups across PEI that are going to be taking place, and public conversations in rural PEI. And I certainly will have more information coming in the next few weeks as the survey dates conclude and we correlate the information. We'll be able to share what has been formulated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Morell-Donagh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've been meeting with healthcare ministers since 2007, in fact, and with the leadership of the communities in our district about more healthcare services for our area, specifically, you know, with the municipalities of Mount Stewart, Morell, and St. Peters. We do not have a physician number assigned to our area. We have a nurse practitioner for 3 hours a week. We've got a lot of good things going on, Mr. Speaker. We have a new potential renovated pharmacy that's going to be expanding. We have an amazing physio service as well in the area. We could use a base for home care out there. We could use a new diabetes care out there, CPOD care. Minister, will you look at our area for increasing healthcare services in Eastern PEI?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, excellent question, and that's exactly why we're going through the exercise that we're doing right now. We're looking for the public consultation. We're looking for consultation and information from providers. Mr. Speaker, we're not prepared to make a decision on any one community or all communities right now until we have all the information back. But certainly, the north side will be considered just like any other community here in PEI. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Morell-Donagh, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the health minister used to say, and I really like this, you know, it used to be about the right care in the right place at the right time from the right provider, and I believe in that too, Mr. Speaker. Minister, will you commit to meeting with the communities on the north side, the leadership there, to find out what our needs are and deliver a rural healthcare hub right in the middle of District 7 in Eastern PEI?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would be delighted to travel to Morell and meet with the group out there. As the honourable member knows, I've already had discussions with one of the councillors from the area. I always enjoy going back to Morell, which is where my father hails from, and my ancestors came from Ireland and settled there. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, indeed, I will arrange a meeting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I received a concerning message this morning informing me that schools received an email communication informing them that student well-being teams are hitting their capacity and will start triaging students based on urgency, with suicidal ideation being the top priority. This message also said that student well-being teams have noticed there is a trend in schools where part-time counselors are referred more frequently to them. They have agreed that more school counselors would help with this situation. I shared yesterday that school counselors are genuinely concerned about the lives of the students they work with and the ones they simply do not have time to work with. Lives are at stake. Question to the Minister of Education. Yesterday you stood in this House and told us that there was an exciting announcement coming up. Is there anything you would like to announce today based on that information?
The Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning.
Mr. Speaker, there's lots of things I would like to announce today, Mr. Speaker, but I need to make sure I follow the proper processes and procedures, Mr. Speaker, and so I'm not going to announce things prematurely. However, Mr. Speaker, rest assured that the issues that the member across is talking about are things obviously we take very, very seriously. Obviously, we're communicating closely with schools about it, and Mr. Speaker, support is coming.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our caucus has spoken about the importance of having money circulate in the local economy, and with the suspension of the Atlantic bubble, that's more important than ever. The House of Commons recently unanimously moved to have government extend the student loan moratorium. For many recent graduates, student loan payments are a significant monthly expense that's preventing them from participating more fully in the economy. According to government's website, the deferral of PEI student loan payments ended on September 30th. Question to the Minister of Education. Will you commit to renewing the provincial moratorium on student loan payments?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I think that's a great suggestion, and I won't commit to it solidly today, but I mean, I'll definitely take that back to the department, and we'll look at that very closely. Thank you.
End of question period. Statements by ministers. The Honourable
moratorium on student loans.
Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this holiday season, the PEI chambers are asking Islanders to put their money where their hearts are. That's the new phrase coined by the PEI chambers for their new Love Local PEI campaign. Building on the existing Love Local PEI promotion initiated by the Greater Charlottetown Area Chamber of Commerce, the Love Local PEI campaign aims to bring attention to the importance of shopping and buying local, as well as showcasing island products. As well as showcasing island products and services and the entrepreneurs behind them. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture is proud to support this campaign with its launch today, running through till March 2021. The campaign is a partnership between the Greater Charlottetown Area Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Summerside Area Chamber of Commerce, West Prince Chamber of Commerce, Kensington and Area Chamber of Commerce, Eastern PEI Chamber of Commerce, and the Acadian and Francophone Chamber of Commerce. For Islanders looking for information on this campaign, they can visit lovelocalpei.ca and at lovelocalpei on social media. Mr. Speaker, I believe supporting local is a mindset. It's an attitude. It's a lifestyle. Supporting local is a conscious choice. It's a conscious choice because when you choose to support local, you're choosing to support your community, your friends, your family, and your province. Mr. Speaker, I ask all members of this Legislative Assembly and all Islanders to choose local this holiday season. So together we can support our local businesses, our farmers, our fishers, our artists, craftspeople, restaurants, tourism and hospitality industry, and our provincial economy. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for bringing this forward, and thank you to the Chambers of Commerce of PEI. Put your money where your heart is, where your hearts are. What a great way to express just how important supporting local is here in PEI. When we support local, we are supporting our neighbors, we're supporting our kids, we're supporting incredible businesses that are going through some of the most difficult times at this point that they probably have ever gone through before. I love the slogan. I love this initiative. I absolutely recommend to everybody to intentionally support local this year, going into the Christmas season, but way past that, because Islanders need it. We need to come together, and that's one thing that Islanders are good at. We're coming together and supporting each other. And yeah, put your money where your hearts are. I love it. Congratulations to the Chambers for coming together and doing this. I look forward to supporting local throughout this holiday season and well beyond, and I think it's really intentional for us to do this. And thank you for bringing this forward and making this initiative well-known, Minister. I completely support it. Thank you.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, third-party House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and a great program by the Chambers, and Minister, thanks for bringing this forward for sure, and maybe this could tie in with some of my questions in question period, because if we do re-implement the $100 grocery voucher, it's going directly into local services, so it would be a great, but in saying that, I think I can't stress enough about buying local, and I know in my own community I try to do it as much as possible, and I think we all do, but sometimes you tend to forget the importance of it, and the importance of it is it's a trickle-down effect to everywhere, and from students getting summer jobs to our farmers, our fishers, just about every industry in PEI is touched by buying local, and it's extremely important. I know in my own area, when you look at McPhee's Meats or Danny Gas or Sanderson's beef farms, and I can remember back when Sobe started to bring on beef products from Atlantic Beef. That was quite a few years ago, but I can still remember saying, well, it's about time. And now they're up to 80% on their store shelves right now on Atlantic Beef. And I think our last year in government, I think was one of the first years that the Atlantic Beef plant actually turned a profit. So it's people are starting to become aware of it, and I think we can do as much as possible and have a conscious effort, and the slogan is certainly right, because it helps everybody and it touches everybody's heart. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise in the House today to announce additional financial assistance and coverage for diabetes supplies. As we know, diabetes affects more than 15,000 Islanders, and it is important that we support these individuals so they can live healthy, fulfilling lives without cost as a barrier. With this additional support, more Islanders can take control of their health. Effective January 1st, 2021, insulin pump coverage will be extended to allow coverage for Islanders up to the age of 25 years old. Mr. Speaker, insulin pumps are currently covered for children and youth up to age 19. In addition, blood glucose test strip coverage will increase from 100 to 120 test strips per month. The additional funding will be offered through the Diabetes Drug Program, which provides assistance with the cost of medications and supplies, and through the Insulin Pump Program, which provides assistance with the cost of insulin pumps and supplies. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to present the new diabetes strategy as we move forward with a renewed focus on diabetes prevention, detection, and management. Raising awareness about diabetes is always very important, but especially as we honor National Diabetes Month. Effective management of diabetes is extremely important in improving the lives of those with the disease. Mr. Speaker, Health PEI's diabetes program offers information and support for those living with diabetes. The service is offered across the province so Islanders can be supported close to home no matter where they live. The new strategy, along with the increased supports, will assist in improving outcomes for Islanders living with diabetes. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank the Diabetes Canada for their continued advocacy and support for this cause. Diabetes Canada is working diligently to raise awareness through their campaign that encourage Canadians to use the hashtag #EndDiabetes. I look forward to continuing our work together in the future as we implement this new strategy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and there's certainly some good news here. It's nice to hear this announcement that insulin pumps will be covered for those up to 25 years of age. Of course, there's still many who are older than 25 years of age that won't be covered, so there's still a ways to go there. I also want to note again that while it's good to increase the number of test strips that are available for people who need them, I think that is essential for those who are using them. If we were to look at the long-term cost implications as well, of not just the cost of the strips themselves, but on our healthcare system, I think it's worth taking a serious look at continuous glucose monitoring, or CGMs, and what this government might do to support their implementation for those who are type 1 diabetics, because they could really that way be able to more effectively manage this condition. And we know that it has significant impacts on the daily life and well-being of those with diabetes of all ages. So it's a good step. It's one little step, and I hope that there's many more steps to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from O'Leary-Inverness, third-party whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to reiterate some of the comments from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke. And I do want to congratulate this minister, because I've sat in that chair, and there's continuous requests for various different illnesses and situations out there where Islanders need assistance. And when I was the minister, we advanced the cause somewhat too, and that's good to see that he's building upon that as well, Mr. Speaker. So this announcement is good news. Diabetes certainly is a very expensive disease to manage for Islanders, Mr. Speaker, so we must continue to push the envelope as elected officials here to ensure that we need to get those who need the help the most. And I do want to acknowledge a number of the people that were advocating for more services when I was minister too, like comment about Brooks Roach and Logan Gallant. Very tirelessly making efforts to raise the awareness and issues around diabetes and the issues that are caused. And I do reiterate, I think that it's one of these situations where if we don't get this right, the causes later on are more costly to Islanders when it comes to healthcare. So I think it's really important that we do continue the advancing the cause of assisting people with diabetes, so that that prevention dollar spent will once again equal a pound cured later on, Mr. Speaker. So I certainly commend the minister for his announcement and appreciate his efforts in this regard. I know he's very passionate about the subject too. Thank you.
Presenting and receiving petitions. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table documents that were promised during the debate on capital budgets from the Department of Education. And I move, seconded by the Minister of Social Development and Housing, that the documents do lie on the table.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg to table documents that were requested yesterday during discussions of the capital budget. Mr. Speaker, included in this package is extensive detail on the electronic medical records, the EMR, and the rollout of that. Also, I have information with regards to the VR headsets from that are being utilized in West Prince. And also, there was questions raised with regards to if there was money allocated for security measures at the Hillsborough Hospital. Mr. Speaker, also included in this package is various org charts with regards to the vast amount of people that are actually working on this this mental health campus, and I'm, as I said previously, I'm very proud to be the minister that's advancing this project, and we have a great amount of people, not only in government, various departments, but we're engaging professionals and consultants on this project. Mr. Speaker, in addition, I'd also like to table the operational plan, functional program, and master plan for the mental health and addiction system. And Mr. Speaker, I move, and seconded by the Honourable Finance Minister, that the said documents be now received and lie on the table.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Tabling of documents. Charlottetown West Royalty.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table a CBC article August 5th stating the province was not able to gather detailed data on the learning impacts of COVID-19 pandemic from last spring. And I move, seconded by O'Leary-Inverness, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
No more tabling of documents. Reports by committees. The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Special Committee on Poverty and PEI, I beg leave to introduce the final report of the said committee entitled Recommendations in Response to Motion Number 36, Creation of a Special Committee of the Legislative Assembly on Poverty and PEI. I move, seconded by the honourable member from Charlottetown West Royalty, that the report be now received and do lie on the table. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 110.5 of the Rules of the Legislative Assembly, I will be moving the motion for adoption of the report on Tuesday, December 1st, 2020.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition, that the report of the Special Committee on Government Records Retention, tabled November 26, 2020, be adopted.
Shall it carry? No, sorry. Sorry. Keep going. I did that before. Keep going.
I was going to let you do that. Thank you,
Refuse
Mr.
that.
Speaker. Okay. The Special Committee on Government Records Retention was created in late June 2020 and directed by the Legislative Assembly of Prince Edward Island to study the missing records referenced in an order of the Information and Privacy Commissioner dated June 9, 2020, as well as the current practices related to electronic records and security. The Special Committee met a total of 14 times to consider these matters and received input from experts in the field of information technology and and electronic records management. Both the current and the former Auditors General and the Information and Privacy Commissioners assisted the Special Committee in its work. As a result of its investigations, the Special Committee on Government Records Retention is making a series of recommendations. Number 1, that all public bodies work to achieve 80% compliance rate for the completion of the basic records management training for all employees required to do so by the end of fiscal year 2020-2021. A rate of 90% by the end of fiscal year 21-22. And 100% by the end of the fiscal year 2022-2023. Number 2, that the Archives and Records Act be amended to add a duty to document requirement. Number 3, that a government-wide policy for routine disclosure, active dissemination be developed. Number 4, that further exploration into the establishment of vital records policy be conducted by the Public Archives and Records Office, also known as PARO. Number 5, that the efforts to promote and automate electronic document and records management continue to receive priority within government. Number 6, that a 3-year RIM strategy for the years 2021 to 2023 be developed to be presented to the Legislative Assembly of Prince Edward Island by the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning in the next sitting. Number 7, that public bodies retain all non-transitory records until retention schedules are fully in place. Number 8, that government, when it provides a written response to this report in the next seasonal sitting, as is required under Rule 110.9 of the Rules of the Legislative Assembly, provides timelines for the implementation of these recommendations, except where the committee has already specified timelines. A focus on missing electronic records, specifically email correspondence, brought the entire system of recorded information management by the government of Prince Edward Island under scrutiny, beginning in 2015. The Special Committee on Government Records Retention is pleased to note that considerable effort has been expended since that time to strengthen the management of information in terms of financial and human resources, training and communication, and legislation and policy. There is, however, more to do to minimize potential vulnerabilities, not only to improve business collaboration and access, but to enable all government employees to participate fully in the capture, classification, and management of information. Adoption of the recommendations put forward by the Special Committee will build on the foundational work of the past and position the government of Prince Edward Island to effectively manage and facilitate access to information in order to support decision-making and ensure accountability. In conclusion, as expressed in Motion 86, the mandate of the Special Committee had a focus on electronic records, and therefore be it further resolved that the committee study the missing records referred in the Information and Privacy Commissioner's order and the current practices related to electronic records and scrutiny. Throughout its consultation and deliberations, the Special Committee viewed its work through the lens of the 2016 Recorded Information Management Strategy, also known as RIM, and the 3-year plan, investigating the evolution of information management within government, assessing the current environment, and considering how best to provide for the future. On that basis, the Special Committee believes that adoption and implementation of its recommendations will achieve the following goals. Public records are created, identified, and managed and appropriately stored or destroyed according to approved retention schedules. Electronic public records, including digital recordings, electronic mail, digital communications, and social media records, are controlled, preserved, and made accessible according to retention requirements. Government transparency and accountability are increased by ensuring the public records are easily accessible, regardless of format or location, for as long as required by record retention schedules. All public records are preserved in an appropriate environment, and human, technology, and financial resources are strategically aligned to achieve the outcomes of the 3-year plan, 2021 to 2023, for recorded information management in Prince Edward Island. The Special Committee on Government Records Retention is grateful to everyone who contributed to its consideration of record information management by the Government of Prince Edward Island. Adoption of this report effectively concludes the work of the Special Committee on Government Records Retention. And Mr. Speaker, I would just like to thank the members of the committee. There were significant meetings over the past 4 months. I'd like to recognize member from Maraldona, member from Montague-Kilmuir, member from Tignish Palmer Road, member from Charlottetown West Royalty, and the leader of the official opposition. It was a really great group to work with on this, and respectfully, I would like to present this report. Thank you.
So anyone else willing to speak to the report? The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to speak to this, and I want to start out by reiterating the thanks at the end of the Chair's remarks there. Of course, she didn't thank herself, but I think it's important that we know that chairing committees, particularly special committees that have the sort of workload in the very compressed time frame like this committee did, is a very onerous task. And this chair did it as she does all of her work in this House, whether she's a member of a committee or sitting as the MLA for her district or in any other capacity. She did it with great vigour, and I want to thank her for that work, particularly as this was emotionally a very difficult time for her. So the fact that she remained on task and did such a fabulous job of steering our committee is something that needs to be said in this House, Mr. Speaker. I also want to thank the clerk, Ryan Redden, who was associated with this committee, who did, again, an enormous amount of work in a very compressed time frame. He arranged 14 meetings over a short period of time, and I think the recommendations that the Chair just read out are of enormous importance going forward here in this province. I want to also point out Marion Johnson, who of course was a deputy clerk here for some time, was still here when I was first elected a few years ago. Because of the scope of the work that we did and the onerous nature of it, she was brought in to help write the report and also do some research, and she did a fabulous job. Yes, you're here, Marion and Ryan. So I think the committee collectively learned a lot through this process, a lot of important information for this House and for Islanders. And I certainly learned a lot personally. I learned an enormous amount about how record management has changed recently, how digitization and electronics has completely changed the nature of what records management is today compared to what it was a little while ago. I learned about why the data breach was so devastating for this province and how well ITSS responded to that threat at the time, and how vulnerable everybody is at a personal level, but a government that holds precious records and very delicate records needs to have very strong safeguards, and we learned a lot about that. We learned again from ITSS about the shortcomings that have existed in record keeping in this province for a long time. We are light years ahead of where we were, I would say, even 10 years ago. And I think that's a credit to previous administrations. I think it's a credit to the civil service, who have taken on records information management training. Everybody who is now onboarded into the civil service is mandated to do that. We're not at 100% yet, but one of the recommendations in the report, of course, is for us to get there within 2 years. That's a huge step forward for every single civil servant to recognize the importance of good records management. It's good not only so we can look back and find things that we're looking for, but so that the work of government is properly documented and available to Islanders. It's part of the transparency and the accountability that government is demanded to supply these days. So the work of this committee was enormously important. I want to particularly talk about the duty to document, which is one of the recommendations from this report. There is no legislative requirement in Canada currently for any province, or even at a federal level, to document, the duty to document. It's done through policy. And many of the pieces of legislation we have here on Prince Edward Island are old. We're always dealing with pieces of legislation that have not been updated for perhaps 10, 20, sometimes much longer than that. So when we do come across an issue that requires legislative updates and changes, it's important that we don't just go to where everybody else is, because we may not revisit that piece of legislation for another 20 years. We need to leapfrog to the front. We always need to be looking at best practices and to make Prince Edward Island a leader when it comes to legislative innovation. And in this case, the recommendation to require through legislation, which was recommended, by the way, by the Information and Privacy Commissioner and a number of other witnesses that we saw in committee, will leapfrog Prince Edward Island to the front when it comes to best practices of record management. And that's something I think that we should be very proud of. And I hope that the Legislative Assembly adopts this recommendation, that we do become the first in Canada to require that. Documenting what government does, as I said earlier, is an enormously important part of transparency and of accountability. Transient records have been used in the past, and by transient records I'm talking about BlackBerry messages, text messages, phone calls, things which cannot, by their very nature, be captured. Too often in the past, those methods were used to facilitate conversation on decisions that required permanent formal records to be created. And one of the recommendations, again from the committee, is to make sure through this duty to document that no longer will important government decisions be able to be left undocumented. So, so much good work. Of course, there were limits on what we could do, and there were frustrations in the committee when we did the portion of our mandate, which was to look back at the lost records and try and retrieve them. We have not been able to do that. We're not the first who have failed to do that. And I can assure this House and Islanders that it was not through a lack of effort. We left no stone unturned. We spoke to all of the pertinent people to try and find out the famous phrase, who deleted those emails and whose accounts they came from. And we have come up short there, and for that I regret. But again, it was not from a lack of trying. So there were limits in what we could achieve going backwards, but there are definitely no limits in how we can create the most modern records management system in Canada. And again, this report is enormously important in that regard. One final remark I'd like to make before I sit down, Speaker, is that the nature of this committee, with 2 members from every party, was again an example of how collaboration can be extraordinarily effective in this House. We had great buy-in from all members of this committee. The committee has done huge work that will propel this province to the top of the heap when it comes to records management, and work that will benefit islanders. And I want to point out that the striking of this committee was through a motion that came from the official opposition, a motion that was unanimously voted against by government members. But despite that, there were enough members on the opposition side at that time for the creation of this committee to go forward, and therefore all of this valuable work to have been done. And I worry now that we have a majority situation, and we talked earlier today about the situation with passing portions of this budget before we did not get all the information that we would like on this side of the House, that in a majority situation, perhaps this committee would never have been struck. And perhaps all of this good work, all of this information, all of this opportunity to move Prince Edward Island forward would not have happened. And I think I look forward to continued collaboration, but I have concerns that good work, such as the work of this committee, is going to become more difficult to do in the future. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I just want on record that perhaps if this had come forward today through a motion from the opposition side, all of this work may never have been done and could have been lost to islanders, and that to me would be a tragedy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Belvedere, and the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a couple of comments. As I would say, we're not a member of this committee, but had subbed in on a couple of pieces, specifically around previous expertise to do with digital record retention. But I wanted to take the opportunity to make a couple of comments regarding the report. As we know, other than the reports from the Committee on Rules, Regulations, Private Bills and Privileges, committee reports are not binding on government. They are a strong indication of the work and the intent that's been done by those committees, and we know that committees now look very different than they did in the past. Not only are they working across party lines in a collaborative manner, but they're doing deep dives into subject matter and bringing back really thoughtful, well-researched and evidence-based recommendations that were not the norm in the past. And it's a real privilege to get to be involved in, I'm on 5, I know a couple of other members in the House, but we're all on a number of different committees, and to see that kind of range and depth of work that happen in committees, it's also can be a little disheartening, Mr. Speaker, to know that when these reports come forward, we're not really sure sort of what's going to happen next. But I wanted to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to speak to how the recommendations in this report, particularly around ITSS and records management and the investment that's required in those and the attention that's required for those, is something that we cannot continue to ignore as we have in the past. And I understand that ITSS and records management and records retention are not at all the most attractive things to talk about on a regular basis, let alone sort of in here. And often they are something that we might do in passing as we discuss a budget line item. You blink and you miss it. But what happens, Mr. Speaker, is that because these things are only remain uninteresting until something goes horribly wrong, like our data breach, for example, that's when we suddenly look and go, gosh, please explain why this looks the way it does. And then we forget again until the next time. This report gives us a real opportunity to look at the investment that's required and why it's required, and how we have to get better and faster at managing and responding to the needs of the things that are less attractive but are essential to our government working in an accountable and transparent manner. And that requires operational and capital investment. And traditionally, these areas are consistently underfunded and behind the times because it is not political or practical to be seen to be putting significant investment into those areas. We have a real challenge with investments that we make that are seen to be for government to do its job, whether that's investing in renovating the building that we work in, which becomes a political football, or investing in something like the IT software that we use to deliver the tools that we use to run government. But we are the first ones to get criticised when those things don't work properly. And Mr. Speaker, this is not really an option for us to have effective, functional, and safe, up-to-date and accurate record keeping and records management. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking government not only to look at this report as a real really thoughtful set of recommendations around challenges past, but also as an opportunity to think about where some of those investments can be made and should be made with a long-term plan for the protection and management of the records, which are so essential to the commitments we've made to the public about the trust that we have in the decisions that we make, and the information that we have to retain here. So whether that's about better storage for the original handwritten, hand-drawn documents that assert our treaty rights and relationships with our Indigenous peoples, because literally those are the documents that we need to reference. Those are archival documents and they need our support, whether that's the land maps that tell us where the property lines lie between different lots of property in the province, or whether it's the text messages that we send back and forth on Blackberries that are the records, perhaps the only records of significant decisions that are being made by ministers in government. Mr. Speaker, all of these things are our responsibility. I'm very grateful to the work of the committee and to the experts who presented to the committee for their expertise that they've shared, and I really am looking forward to seeing these recommendations be implemented in a meaningful way. Mr. Speaker, when these do appear in the budget line, that's a budget line item that I can support, is investment in things like this, and I look forward to having the opportunity to do so in the next and future investments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wish to be brief. I congratulate the member for the great work from the committee, Mr. Speaker. I think it's very, very important that we continue to move forward in this regard, and it all helps give confidence to those we serve, Mr. Speaker, that we're doing the right things in here. I would take exception to a couple of comments and like to clarify, Mr. Speaker, that the Leader of the Opposition made, because I feel they might unfairly impugn me in my intentions, Mr. Speaker. To date, as of today, there has not been one motion put through this House, Mr. Speaker, without multi-party support. That motion last night, Mr. Speaker, to carry that part of the budget received multi-party support, Mr. Speaker. There are 13 members of the Progressive Conservative Caucus on this side of the floor, Mr. Speaker, and there are 13 members across, Mr. Speaker. For the capital budget to get carried, Mr. Speaker, we're going to need support. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, it's false to insinuate how you, Mr. Speaker, as the impartial advisor in this House would vote, Mr. Speaker. So I would say we have to continue to work together. There's precedent in how the Speaker has to vote. He doesn't just vote along party lines, Mr. Speaker. We all know that. We need to work together to get these things done. I believe we have demonstrated in 19 months a desire to work together, to collaborate, to come across the floor with each other, to work together, to take good ideas and to put this forward. So I really, really take exception to the situation that might suggest that we are trying to use this on paper majority to ram something through, Mr. Speaker. That is not the case, and the only reason we voted against the special committee, Mr. Speaker, was because we thought there was an active committee that could do this. But having said all of that, the committee did amazing work. They did time, it took a lot of time. They investigated this and they come up with wonderful recommendations that I wish to read. And I do think because the committees have been set up the way they did, once again, is an indication of our desire to try to do what is best here, Mr. Speaker. So I feel we are still in a minority situation, Mr. Speaker, although there might be on paper 14 members of the PC party. One of them is an impartial speaker, Mr. Speaker. You do a wonderful job, and the decisions you make here are based on precedent, Mr. Speaker, based on the best information that you have, and we should never assume how you would vote, Mr. Speaker, if you were given the opportunity to do so. I would just like that to add to the record as well.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the report? The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to stand up and comment on the report. I don't know about other legislators here, but by far the most common question or comment from constituents and other people commenting from all over PEI has been what happened to the records, who deleted them, and what's happening now. So that was why I spent several sessions sitting in with the committee. I don't claim to do any of the work. I was just listening, but they did an incredible amount of work, and I think the conclusions from the reports are very reassuring, and I hope that puts the questions to rest. So I want to again thank all the members of the committee for doing the incredible amount of work that was associated with the report. And you know, in reference to the comment, it was well worth the effort to get that motion passed to create the committee in the first place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any other members to like to speak to the report? No? Shall the report carry? Carry. Good job. Introduction of government bills. Government motions. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that the second order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order number 2, consideration of the capital estimates in committee.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that this House do now resolve itself into committee of the full House to take into consideration capital supply to Her Majesty.
Shall it carry? Carry. The Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker, to chair the Committee of the whole House, please.
This is now in a committee of the whole House to consider the grant of capital supply to Her Majesty. Honourable members, a request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Good morning. Would you please state your name and position for Hansford, please?
Pageant, Assistant Secretary to Treasury Board.
Thank you very much. Honourable members, we had left off on page 21, capital expenditure for justice and public safety. We had read the section on capital improvements, and it is presently on the floor for discussion. Minister of Agriculture and Land.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, there was a question last night about the completion of the jail, and the jail is expected to be completed for the spring of 2022. The design work took a little longer because of COVID, but the overall timeline is on track with work has already started. When this project was identified as a candidate for special COVID federal funding, staff at TIE and JPS reviewed the project and worked with the architects to confirm it fits the criteria. JPS is thrilled to access these 80-cent dollars and the working with the federal government to have a formal announcement at this site to give a progress update in January.
Thank you, Minister. Shall this section carry? Carry. Total capital expenditure, justice and public safety, $13,595,000. Shall it carry? Carry. Page 23, capital expenditure, social development and housing, 2021-2022 budget estimate, equipment. Appropriations provided for the purchase of equipment, child protection technology, $373,800. Total equipment, $373,800. Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. This line item was underspent in 2020-21 with the unspent balance now allocated into the new year. Can you explain the delay in the spend and detail what this expenditure is actually for?
A lot of stuff here, but. The information in this particular section relates to a structured decision-making model for the department. It's a risk management tool that identifies persons according to the likelihood of subsequent outcomes for future neglect or abuse of child and enables the agencies to target the services to children and parents at the highest risk for negative outcomes.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you. So does this this project they said was underway previously and is now, it's still kind of been bumped into another year. Is this a cash flow issue or is there some other reason why it's being delayed?
Yes, I believe it is a cash flow issue. They had some delays in securing a project manager to get the project underway.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Chair, if you could tell me what are we using in the interim, because this sounds like obviously a pretty critical piece of a critical tool. Could you advise how is this currently being provided?
Honourable Member, we do not have that in front of us, but we'll bring it back.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. I would appreciate that, as obviously, child protection is not something that we tend to discuss much in here, but it's obviously a really critical part of this file. I understand there's obviously a lot of safety issues, and we heard just yesterday the number of cases that are going through that department, on an annual basis is over, I believe, over 3,000. And so, what I'm hearing is this tool is something that actually would help with some preventative measures. Is that correct, Chair?
Again, Honourable Member, we just have the numbers in front of us. We don't really have the details on what exactly, the delay, what caused the delay and what that actually, does for the department.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask when you expect this to be ready and implemented and up and running? Is there a finish date for the project?
They show this particular project over the next 2 fiscal years, so the current 2021, the current year we're in, and I think there's segments going in the next 2 years. I'm not sure what implies and what is entailed in the actual project itself, and whether it's a phased in or a kind of a stepped approach to the implementation.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Chair, if I could ask for, with the information that's brought back, if we could just get that information on whether it's a phased rollout. I think usually with projects of this scale, they are, but it would be really great to get that qualified, just because I am concerned about sort of what's being done in the interim. So if perhaps if I could ask for that clarification, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
I'm good on this section, Chair.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to go back to education. I recall last night there was information brought back, questions that were answered. I remember a document on the table, Minister, that somebody had kind of pointed to, but I don't think that was tabled. I just tried to go and get it from the clerk's office, and I didn't find it.
Honourable member, we did have it on the table. We thought it was tabled, but it wasn't. He tabled it today during tabling of documents. The honourable member, yeah.
You okay? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Mermaid Stratford, that's everything? Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Charlotte Section Carey.
Carried.
Capital improvements. Appropriations provided for capital improvements and construction of infrastructure. Housing renovations, $800,000. Housing construction, $11,847,200. Total capital improvements, $12,647,200. Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. We'll start with the appropriations for housing renovations. It's good to see that there was an overspend, or more money was invested, but then we see the budget back to the sort of the 800,000. Chair, there was a really specific highlight in the AG report from 2017 on seniors housing that talked about how the bulk of the seniors housing that's in the province is aging to end of life. Given that the department advised that they were meeting all the recommendations of that AG report, could you advise why that investment for housing renovations is so low?
The one thing I would note related to the overspending in the current fiscal year, there were some renovations for the Smith Lodge included in the current year, hence the one-time bump up. Traditionally, the Housing Corporation has received an appropriation of approximately $800,000 to look after the units right across PEI, and up until now they have indicated and submitted that amount on a continuous basis. So I'm left to assume that that's sufficient to keep things in a reasonably operating manner.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that, and I recognise that these are funds that are provided to the Housing Corporation. However, I would suggest that the AG report was quite clear that there was a considerable risk given the age of the infrastructure, the bulk of which was actually built in the 80s, 30 or 40 years old at this point. And as we'd heard from the Minister of Social Development and Housing, that there are 1,500 units, then there's that $800,000 doesn't really go very far at all. I don't know, Chair, whether this would be a time to ask for an intervention, but there's a real gap between what we have in terms of the information about how many units there are, the age of those units, the risk that is identified in the AG report, and what is, frankly, a very small investment that's being allocated to the Housing Corporation.
Honourable Member, this is the allocation that was put forward by the department, and we can bring back exactly maybe what the list is, what renovations need to be done, and what the justification is behind the 800,000.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. I'm following again on there's been some very public comments from the Director of Housing that all the recommendations were met by the department for the AG report. So I really fail to understand how a consistent investment of only $800,000 is going to be sufficient when there was a clear deficiency of investment identified in the AG report. Those two things don't match. So either the Housing Corporation isn't doing the work it should do and the department doesn't know, or the department isn't doing the work that it said it was going to do. Neither of those things are actually really satisfactory. Chair, I would ask if there is an opportunity to have an update from the minister responsible.
Honourable Member, we'll reach out to the department and bring back the actual needs, I guess, and what renovations are being done, where they are with overall renovations for housing, and we'll bring that back to you.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. If we're investing the same amount of money as we have in previous years, which doesn't align with the commitments that were made by the Housing Department, then I would suggest that that list of priorities becomes really important, because it means that there are priorities that are not being met. With that many properties, we can do some pretty simple cost analysis that says just to sort of do a few roofs on a few buildings, and you would cover that amount of money. So I think that priority list would be really important for us to be able to understand what is not being done as much as what is. I'd also, Chair, I'd like to ask just about sort of if this money is being allocated to the Housing Corporation, then where does the Housing Corporation report on how it makes its decisions and recommends those back to the department?
Honourable Member, we do not have that in front of us. What we have here is the actual budgetary line for renovations to housing, and I've committed to bringing that back, and I'm sure that the department's listening as we speak.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. So we have another example of a line item which is a line item with no information behind it. We don't know how the priorities have been determined. We don't know what that investment is going to be for. It would be great to find out that investment is for energy conservation or transitioning buildings to be net zero ready, for example. But this is literally a line item with a monetary amount assigned and no other information. It makes it very difficult to be able to sort of feel confident that the information that we had provided by the Housing Department, that they were meeting those recommendations of the AG report, are actually accurate. And I think it's imperative that the department reply with that detail for us to be able to have any confidence in that priorities are actually being addressed, Chair.
If it's of any benefit, I have a listing of the kinds of things that were done with the 800, or planned to be done, I guess, with the 1.3 million or 1.4 million that's underway this year. And it's a lot of safety issues for sure. It's building envelope issues. There's elevator upgrades at Haviland Court. It's boiler and heating lines in Murray Harbour. It's windows, siding, doors, and insulation in Surrey. It's ventilation upgrades in Musquesh. It's siding, windows, again, insulation in O'Leary. I think truly they have a fairly consistent process for identifying critical needs and upgrades for the housing stock, and have put forward a budget that they believe will meet the needs for the upcoming year, and that's kind of what's presented here.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. No, and I appreciate that because it does speak to the kind of renovations we would expect with housing stock which is 30 or 40 years old. Absolutely, we know that we've heard consistently from seniors who are living in the housing that, for example, the air quality in the air, especially in the heat of the summer, has been unbearable. We know that there are issues with safety with doors where the door frames are swollen and the doors can't be locked properly anymore, for example. I also think about the fact that we've had push from my honourable colleague from Murray Harbour, sorry, I just forgotten the name, Montague Kilmuir, about the investment that's required to maintain schools. And how we've had sort of significant challenges with safety and issues around schools. And there are only 56 schools. We have 1,500 residencies for senior and family housing across the province, but there's more money being spent on, and still not enough, on infrastructure renovations for schools than there is on the places where we're housing some of our most vulnerable islanders. So there's obviously a really big gap in priorities when it comes to maybe just people aren't seeing that what we're hearing again from constituents about the challenges they're facing, maybe that's not getting through to the Department of Housing or to the Housing Corporation or wherever it is that makes the decisions. But Chair, I am really concerned about the difference between the media and presentation of information from the department that everything is fine, and the kind of innovations that are having to happen to fix what are safety issues with a budget of only $800,000. Is there any opportunity for additional funds to be applied to this budget?
Honourable Member, we looked to the department for their budget requests. This is what was requested. We can bring back that to the department, and we'll ask them to come forward with their actual detailed list of needs.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Chair, I'd ask that that list is, as we did with the schools, which worked to some effect in terms of us being able to identify the difference between the need and the actual solution. We'd like to see a list of all the needs of housing challenges in the public housing portfolio, and then which ones are actually getting done. Because somewhere in there, somebody's having to make a decision about what safety need or comfort need or accessibility need isn't going to get met. And then that means that, you know, for us and our colleagues on this side of the house, we'll at least then have the accurate information to be able to explain to people why this is the year they're not going to get the air conditioning system that they need, or the heating that they need, or the elevator that they need, and it's because it wasn't made a priority by the Housing Corporation or the Department of Housing. So a full list would be appreciated.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
I'd like to ask some questions on the housing construction budget. I don't know if you have anyone else in your list, Chair.
I do have others, and I can come back to you if you wish.
That would be great, thank you.
You're welcome. Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Chair. I too have some concerns about this number, and is the list that you received from the minister prioritized when you receive it to come to any of these conclusions about this, how much funding is going to be spent?
I'm not sure what list you mean.
Well, when the minister submits, you said that you receive your information from the department. I'm just trying to figure out priority. Like, how do you prioritize? The budget's gone down.
The Department of Finance receives a number, Honourable Member, not a prioritized list. There is a whole department, a number of government workers who their day-to-day job is to ensure that the priorities of Islanders are listed and the priorities of housing are listed.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
I'm just confused because in the minister's mandate letter, it says to double the budget and threshold for existing home renovations and repair programs. And I don't see a doubling of the budget. I don't see it. It's, yeah.
That's the operating budget.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Home renovation program. That would be grants provided to homeowners
Yeah.
to do the work themselves.
Not this budget.
And with this, and I mean, you talked about there was boiler repairs being done, and I want to ask specifically, do you have anything on the list for Huntington Court?
I'm not showing anything for Huntington Court on the list that I have.
Okay, that is
Charlottetown West Royalty.
That's a large senior unit in my area that's struggling with air quality, and you know, and I look to see $800,000 allocated to the repairs, and we're talking about incredibly aging buildings at this time. Our seniors have to be at home. They're spending quite a bit more time in there, and I was hoping to see more on this budget line. And yeah.
To be fair, what I quoted was the work that was underway in the current fiscal year, so against the 1.4 million. I don't have the list. We promised to bring back the list of what's priority for next year, so Huntington may be on that list, but that's the list we're bringing back.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
I mean, we've seen rapid movements with COVID in many other areas, and I'm just concerned that this budget line is dramatically low for what our people in Prince Edward Island need. Can you tell me how much of that was it? The 1.4 million was spent at Smith Lodge. How much?
I think the plan for Smith Lodge, I get the right line item here, is about 444,000 is the projected number.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Okay, 444,000. Now, was that to take them to get that building up to code for increased capacity for?
I'm not sure what the scope of the work was for that, but I would presume that it was to have it ready to accept the residents as has been discussed.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
No, okay, that's it for now. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Charlottetown Brighton. Charlottetown Brighton?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Thank you, Chair. Can I assume, based on answers made earlier by the Minister of Housing, that there's no funds in here for playgrounds?
Honourable Member, we have no indication of that, but we're not sure what the 800,000 is actually going to be allocated for. I would not assume that it would be for playgrounds.
Okay.
Charlottetown Brighton.
Well, I was really happy to be able to educate the Minister on social development and housing for the need for children to have access to playgrounds. So my question is, if the Minister came back to you and wanted to add that into projects, would you be able to accommodate them with a contingency fund or the like?
If the Minister comes to us with an ask, comes to Treasury Board with an ask, then we will review it, but it could be as a special warrant. It could be they find funds within their own department to make that happen. So we're more than open to anything that the Minister brings forward.
Charlottetown Brighton.
So earlier on, the Minister commented that in almost all cases there were playgrounds available in the neighborhood, the housing. I just want to educate both you and the Minister, if he's allowed to listen, if not speak, that having a playground in the neighborhood is great, but it's not at all the same thing as having access in the immediate neighborhood of your place, because that allows you to do things inside, like a mother taking care of a small infant while a smaller kid plays outside in view. It's just not the same thing. So I'd like to make that statement, and I hope the Minister is listening. Thank you.
You're welcome. Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. In this spend for housing construction, is the Somerset Manor, the new affordable housing units that are going there, is that part of this spend?
New site on the old Somerset Manor site? Yes.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you. Why is it only, well, I guess, first question, how much of this is going towards the Somerset Manor? Or, well, not the Somerset Manor, the old Somerset Manor site?
Over the 5-year envelope, there's approximately $6.7 million associated with the 32-unit project in Summerside.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. Why is it only going to be 32 units? Is there some limitation keeping us to 32, considering we're trying to get to 1,200?
Honourable Member, this is the number that was decided upon for that Summerside housing project, and the figures we have reflect that.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So who made that decision and submitted that to you?
It would be through Social Development and Housing.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. And are they planning to have 1,200 housing units put up in short order to deal with our housing crisis?
Honourable Member, I can't really comment on that. We're looking at the numbers. We're looking at the numbers that are in our capital budget, and this is what was allocated for, was 32 units in Summerside.
I have an intervention from the Minister of Social Development and Housing.
The 1,200 units, it's threefold. There's capital builds, there are VHDP programs, which is under the operating budget, as well as there's some mobile rental vouchers. So that's where the 1,200 come from. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Summerside South Drive.
I'm sorry, Chair. I couldn't hear that. I'm going to put my earbuds in. Could you repeat that again, Minister?
Minister, could you repeat your response?
Certainly. No applause on the second time around here. Anyway, yes, certainly more than happy to, Chair. There's three aspects or three ways in which the 1,200 is reached through capital builds or capital projects as to what we're reviewing here today. The other would be under the operating budget, which would take in the Affordable Housing Development Program, as well as the mobile rental vouchers. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. I can appreciate that the mobile rental vouchers and whatnot aren't in this budget, and there's other programs that aren't recognized here, but we've underspent by $8 million, and now we've only added $3 million. We're in the middle of a housing crisis. Why didn't we just slide forward those $8 million we didn't spend?
For sure, related to the units that were announced and included in the budget last year, the funding for that is included in this 5-year window. Has been sort of a little bit common here. Some of the starts were not at the time that the department had hoped. They're not quite as far along as they had hoped. And at the end of the day, the money for the units are contained within this 5-year window.
Summerside South Drive.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What wasn't quite what they hoped?
The start times. We had they had hoped to get going a little bit earlier, and that hence there was some money that was kind of lapsed in the current, expected to be not spent in this current year, and that money was reprofiled into the future years.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess I still don't understand why, if we had money unspent, we wouldn't revise our plans and add to the number. Is there some limitation on the site that keeps us at 32?
Honourable Member, when money is allocated for a project, it's for that project. If a spend doesn't happen within a particular year, it's moved to the next year because it's approved for that project. It's not, you don't just take that money and do something else with it. That's not the way government operates. So if money was allocated for a particular project, which is this one here in Summerside, if the money did not get spent because there's a delay, it's moved forward to the next year because we've committed to that project and we're moving forward with it, so that the allocation has to be there.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So based on that, we didn't spend $8 million, so that got slid forward to this year? Is that correct?
It's moved forward with the project. We don't, that's what it's approved for. We don't go ahead and spend it on something else. Any of the allocations that we have, as you're well aware, when we do a project under capital spend, that goes directly to our long-term debt. So there's not, we have $8 million on the table we didn't spend this year, we're going to spend it on something else. That's not the way it goes.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. And could we not use a special warrant for this? We seem to be really eager to do it for paving, but here we are with housing and an opportunity to really deal with the issue in Summerside, and we seem to be underspending. I'm pretty sure that site could handle quite a bit more than 32 units.
So a special warrant for what, Honourable Member?
More units.
Well, there's already a project in the works. There's a plan already for 32 units. You don't just say, okay, we're going to add 30 more or 20 more. This is the plan that we've got for this particular site for 32 units. There was a delay in the construction, so the money will move forward in the budget for that particular project.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I understand there's a plan, and, plans can change. I'm pretty sure we've done quite a bit of pivoting during COVID here. We could just blame COVID and say, no, we're not going to do that old plan. We're going to do a new plan with more units.
Honourable Member, as the Minister has responded to your question about the 1,200 units, that is happening within capital and within operating combined. So the need is being addressed as best we can at this particular time, and we will move forward with the 32 units in Summerside.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So let's break. How many of these 1,200 are going to end up in our capital budget? There was 3 different streams that the Minister had mentioned there. How many do we plan on having in our capital budget owned through public housing?
My understanding is it's the 32 units in Summerside that we're looking at right now, is it not? Or is it the 100 total?
I have an intervention from the Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to recap a couple of things here, and particularly with regard to Summerside, if you would like. There are 32 units, and these are seniors that are opening this winter, in the winter of 2021. There was a COVID delay there. Originally, those units were expected to have been occupied at this point in time. But with regard to the 100 units, they are not just in Summerside, they're not just in Charlottetown, they are province-wide. So there's Morel, which will be mixed, seniors and family, of a design work tendered in the process of being awarded. And Georgetown, mixed, 10 design work tendered, again in the process of being awarded. Summerside, family, these are the 32 units that the honourable member is referring to. The balance of units will be in the Charlottetown area. Going back to Summerside, the 30 and the property that the honourable member is referring to, I think that not to go off on a tremendous tangent here or anything, but yes, it does. It takes time. You look within government, you have to go through procurement. In the case of Summerside, there's the rezoning of land. You have to go through an RFP. You have to go through for design and construction. So it is an extended process. I think, too, though, you look at the fact that the property in Summerside, the former Manor property, is owned by the PEI Housing Corporation, and there is a capital budget brought forward, as the honourable member knows, every year. So we have to be in a position that, yes, we do react, but we have to react fiscally, and we have to react based on where the needs are. So I'll leave it at that, Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So based on that answer, we're feeling that the needs are going to be met by this addition of these 32 family units on that site. We're done in Summerside after that? Needs are met?
Honourable Member, there's always work that can be done. This right now is what we have as a budgetary ask through our capital budget. And I'd also like to point out to the Honourable Member, if $8 million is left on the table this year and we spend it on something else, that $8 million has to be found somewhere else next year to continue the project. This is a project that we've agreed to, we're working on, and if we did not move that money forward, we would be going in debt another $8 million because we still have to find that money somewhere in the future because we have approved that project. It's not left on the table, it's moved forward.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. That's a fantastic point, Minister. I mean, we overspent on our roads and paving by like $76 million, so that's money that we're not going to have in the future for all of these other projects we need to do. Is that right?
Honourable Member, I'd like to point out to you again the previous 5-year plan versus our 5-year plan that we're working on now. There is a 219% increase in education. There's a 191% increase in health. There's an 885% increase in housing. There's a 6% increase in transportation. And we were accessing funds that were available federally for our highways and our transportation.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. And so does that change anything about we're going to have $76 million less? Because that seems to contradict what you just told me in the answer to the previous question.
We are also accessing federal funds that are available and will not be on the table if we don't spend them now. So you can't compare apples to apples. That's not what you're doing. The federal government came to us and said, the projects that are approved through the Build Canada Fund, we want to move forward to on a more expedient way to stimulate the economy, to help each of the provinces. So if we did not do that special warrant, we would not be able to access the $50 to get road work done. It was extra money that the federal government was putting forward in a quicker process.
Honourable members, I just want to remind you that we're on capital expenditures for social development housing, so if we can keep our questions pertaining to the capital improvements section of this, transportation will be up next. Okay,
Thank you,
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, well, the reason we're digging into this is because I'm asking why we're not spending more money on housing, and the answers I'm getting don't make any sense when you compare what we're doing in transportation and the special warrants we issue for that. So that's why we're on this subject here now.
Again,
how it relates to what we're talking about.
Again, Honourable Member, I'll point out the previous 5-year plan, $4.125 million was spent on housing. In the current 5-year plan, $40,644,000 will be spent on housing, 885% increase over the previous 5-year plan.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. I still don't feel I've gotten an answer to the question when I asked, you told me that we couldn't issue a special warrant to change around this housing plan right here because that would just, like the money doesn't just slide forward. But then when I asked you about if indeed the money that we spent extra on paving was going to have the same effect, I didn't get an answer. I just got we're spending more on other things.
Honourable Member, you can ask that question when we get to the next section, please. We're trying to keep it to social development housing and the section that we're on at the moment. And I'm just trying to keep this going and deal with what's in front of us at this moment. We will get to transportation in the next section.
Thank you, Chair. But the questions I'm asking are, we're going to pass by this section and we're going to go to transportation, and then I'm not going to find out what I need to know until we're in the next section. Then we'll just come back. Is that?
But I'll remember you're asking questions about transportation.
Special
that is
warrant.
The next section.
I'm asking questions about special
Honourable Member,
warrants.
you're asking questions about transportation and about $76 million. If you want to ask those questions, you'll have that opportunity when we get to that section. Please keep your questions to this section that we're presently on. Summerside South Drive.
Why don't we issue a special warrant to do some more housing in Summerside?
Honourable Member, we are already increasing our budget by 885% over the 5-year capital plan. Those are the figures. The previous 5-year capital plan was $4 million, just over $4 million. The current 5-year capital plan is $40 million. Honourable Member, we are increasing spending in housing. We continue to do that. There's always more that can be done, and we as a government will commit to doing more, and we are doing more.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So my concern here is that 32 units is great, don't get me wrong, but that site can take quite a bit more, and I wouldn't want to see us do something that kneecaps us in the future for putting even more units in a prime location. So that's why I'm digging in on this so far.
And I appreciate that, Honourable Member. There are many places across PEI that would like to have social housing and seniors housing. We have increased the budget, and the 5-year capital plan is now 885% up over the previous 5-year capital plan. There is a demand, and we are seeing that demand, and we're reacting to that demand.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So I heard that we're going to be putting out 1,200 units here. That's in the story relating to the announcement of this building that we're talking about here right now. And I've also heard the Minister through his intervention mention the rental vouchers and other programs. I've also talked to developers who've said that it's very difficult to find those kinds of programs and whatnot. So has there been a shift or a decision made to focus more on public housing as opposed to partnering with developers to create affordable housing units?
I would say we work with both the private and with government to ensure that we have a good balance, and we've had more than a number of programs that the $45,000 per door that we offered to private developers for housing. There have been a number of programs. We'll continue to work with the private sector, and we see constantly new builds happening across the province with apartments and dwellings for any islander, and we will continue to work with the private sector to ensure that those are accessed through programs like our rental vouchers.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So in the Housing Action Plan, one of the line items says that we'll be renewing expiring rental agreements, and we're fully aware that there's some rental agreements not being renewed here and whatnot. So that's going to have some housing stock fall off of our affordable housing list. Has that been factored? When we say we're going to go plus 1,200, are we subtracting all the ones we're going to lose?
Rental agreements will be through our operating budget, Honourable Member. Rental agreements will be through our operating budget, Honourable Member. At the moment, we are dealing with our capital investments for housing for government builds. We're not discussing rental renewals right now.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. I fully realize that, Minister, but we're going to have to build an awful lot more public housing if we're having other affordable housing slip off the list, so it directly relates to each other.
We've increased the number of rental vouchers. I don't have the figure in front of me, but we continue to work with the private sector to ensure that there is housing available for social development housing that is needed.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. So when we have our affordable housing list, and I had asked a question if these 32 family units are going to address the need, and I think I got a yes from that. Was that the answer?
Well, Honourable Member, we can always do more. We realize that. We can always do more. This is what I said was, this is what was allocated for the Summerside region, the 32 units, which government is building. We continue with that project. There has been a delay due to COVID, but we'll continue to build this facility, and if there's more units needed, we'll work with the private sector, or the minister can come back to us with a different plan if that's what's needed. But right now, we're looking at the 32 units for Summerside.
Honourable Member, I'm going to move on to, I have 5 other people on my list, and I'll put you back on the list if you choose.
Thank you.
Okay. Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Chair. I've been following this debate about the percentages of improvement. My comment on that particular thing is that it's a little bit ridiculous to compare your effort, which is substantial. You are making a real effort, shouldn't be compared to previous government's total lack of effort, but should be compared to the actual need. Or you satisfying, 10% of the need. Anyway, I was actually complimenting on a delightful little item I found in a footnote in your budget that without any funding attaching to it, that you're planning to have a design competition on housing. I find that a delightful idea on several levels. First of all, I've been proposing it on several occasions in the House, and I'm also an architect, and I think housing in general, as it's being built right now, really needs a shot in the arm to raise the level. I was wondering if you can tell me a little bit more about the implementation of that and which department will be in charge of it.
I believe that item came forward from the official opposition ask, and while itself the actual spirit and intent of the competition wouldn't fall under the auspices of the capital budget, I believe it's something that the departments, whether it be, I suspect it'll be TIE that would be working on that particular competition. They generally are involved with the architects and as project managers on behalf of government.
Charlottetown Brighton.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate my colleagues from Charlottetown Brighton's comments about apples to apples. The minister's mentioned that a couple of times, Chair, and I think when you had a previous budget, a previous government that talked about a housing action plan but didn't actually put any money in the capital budget, so there was only $4 million. Then when you come along and put $40 million over 5 years, it's going to look really pretty awesome. And so, sort of an 800% increase is compared to pretty much zero is going to look good, but let's be clear, sort of a $40 million over 5 years is not enough to address the gap that we have, which is about, the commitment was for 1,000 units or 1,250, depending on which plan you look at. Chair, wondering if I can get some clarity on how many actual builds have been completed in the fiscal year that we've just finished, and are planned for the next fiscal year. Well, how many actual capital builds are we talking about? Total.
Based on the information provided by the department, there's 32 units on Pioneer Drive that is scheduled for completion in April 2021. There's 10 units in Surrey that have been complete. There's 20 units on Beach Grove Road that are complete, 32 units on Frank Mellish Drive in Summerside, scheduled for 2021. 32 units being designed in Summerside, 10 each in Georgetown and Morel being designed currently, or going to be RFP for design is imminent, I believe. And then the next is 48 units planned for Charlottetown that is still at the securing land stage.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Okay, so some quick math tells me it's 146 units that are currently sound like they've got something pretty solid in place, and an additional 48 that are kind of a rough idea. Does that sound correct? Okay, so we have a target of 1,200 units over 5 years. In the first 2 years, you're going to manage to do just under 200. And then the balance of this is sitting with downloading onto developers for an affordable housing development program, which you put on hold, and rental vouchers, which no matter how many times we hear it from you, are not actually units. They're just money being paid to landlords. Great plan, but you're trying to make fetch happen. Affordable rental vouchers are not affordable units. So do you really have confidence that you're going to be able to actually address the capacity issue that we have for affordable housing with the $40 million investment?
I have an intervention from the Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you.
Yes, I just want to clarify one of the comments that the honourable member made. She is correct in that the AHDP was put on hold. It has been reopened, which I had mentioned previously here in the House within the last few days. And just want to provide that clarity, Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. That's good to hear. We have a number of developers who are really anxious to be able to access that so that they can do their piece for introducing new affordable units into the inventory. I guess I'm going to repeat my question, Chair. We have maybe 200 units that will be built maybe by the end of the 2022 fiscal year. How are you going to address the capacity issue and reach that 1,200 unit target when rental vouchers do not create new capacity?
Honourable Member, we see across the province new apartment buildings being built, and there will be opportunity for through social development housing for tenants or for people that need housing to access some of that those bills. And we're not competing with private industry and private developers to build so that there's no need for their apartments as well, honourable members. So to me, a rental voucher is a great way to work with our private sector to ensure that affordability is there for all islanders. And more can be done? Absolutely. Can there be more done? Absolutely. We are working and balancing what we have to work with as far as funding across Prince Edward Island for all our sectors to ensure that the economy is growing, that we can pay for what we are actually promising for islanders, that we can do our very best to live within our means. COVID has put us in a precarious situation. We realize that, but we are there for all islanders and will continue to be there for islanders.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. I think you find that people who need to have affordable housing, the clue is in affordable. Affordable means that you can actually afford it on your income. And at 25% of your income, an apartment that's currently being listed as a 2-bedroom apartment anywhere in PEI, starting at $1,250 up to $1,450, depending on where you're located, is not affordable. So the rental vouchers that your government has spent the chair of this government has spent almost $20 million on over the past couple of years is actually more than the investment that you've made in building new houses. And those rental vouchers come out of our operational budget. But Chair, I'm making the point that we are comfortable spending more money out of our operational budget for short-term band-aid solutions that go to landlords rather than actually investing in building housing. If we had been able to take even a portion of the money that we've spent on rental vouchers and added it to the capital budget, we'd have 100 more units available right now that people could actually afford to live in. And I wouldn't have seniors calling me worrying that they're going to be evicted before Christmas. Chair, I would like to ask what the plan is from this government on the transitioning from depending on rental vouchers, which are a short-term solution, and actually investing in affordable, which is rent geared to income, affordable housing, which is where the gap in our capacity sits.
Honourable Member, there are a number of priorities in government, and if I look at the official opposition's list of priorities, you have a number of priorities as well, and government has met I think all of them but one are working on them. 2 of them were in the operating budget. We have met all of those in this capital budget. We continue to work with opposition to make sure that Islanders are looked after, and included in that was investment in affordable housing and in transitional housing, both of which, Honourable Member, we are doing. Could we do more? Absolutely.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. Could we do more is not the answer of leadership. That's an answer of passing the buck down the road. And I am not asking you to be accountable to the opposition on the investments that this government is making. I'm asking you to be accountable to Islanders who are in desperate need of housing solutions and have been for years. This is not a new problem. We are talking about this ad nauseum continuously because it is an ongoing problem. And Chair, yes, we can absolutely and should be doing more, and that means revising plans. As my honourable member from Summerside South Drive said, plans change because circumstances change. The fact that we are comfortable with having 750 vulnerable islanders on a wait list for the 3rd year in a row is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to be comfortable spending money for short-term solutions and ignoring the long-term requests. I am proud of the fact that this opposition has made housing a priority in this House and that we actually have begun to speak about it as not something that only happens to poor people who don't count. But Chair, this is a situation and a problem for all islanders, and we all should be caring about it, and we should be showing leadership on it. And I am disappointed in the response that we should do more, but it's not a priority, because that's what I'm hearing from the Minister speaking to this point right now. Chair, I'd like to ask if we can have a confirmation on whether there has been any application to the Rapid Help Funding Initiative be made available through CMHC.
Honourable Member, we'll bring that back. Intervention?
Intervention from the Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the Rapid Housing Initiative, it was announced, if I recall correctly, October 27th. It had been alluded to previous to that. The Department of Social Development and Housing is working with partners, as I'm sure the honourable member knows, but there's 2 different components to that. Nationwide, one of a large city stream of $500 million, as well as the balance of $500 million. But back to the honourable member's point, the deadline for applications is the end of this year, December 31st, and we are working with partners, and applications will be submitted through CMHC. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. That's good to hear. I would point out, as I did point out to others who felt they needed to correct the facts on this one, is that there is a $500 million stream. The deadline is December 31st, and that provinces and municipalities are actually eligible to apply themselves directly, as well as through partners. One would hope that when there's $1 billion, half of which is available right now, to address what is a pressing need for housing, and it literally provides funding for creative solutions. In this case, the focus is on taking existing properties and turning them from whatever they currently are into housing. We know that effectively, if the government doesn't make this a priority and do more, as we've heard, we the feeling that maybe they don't feel they need to, but frankly, you've got a deadline and you've got money that you're going to leave on the table. And we have an opportunity here to show leadership and to take advantage of a program that is begging for us to go in and say, yes, please, we want to do that for Islanders because we care about them. And so, Minister, I would strongly urge your department to make this a priority and to be creative about what you are willing to look for. Chair, I'm aware that there are other people on the list, so I'll cede my space at this point, but I'd like to remain on the list for future consideration. Thank you.
Sure. Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if there's anything in this budget allocated to any sort of shelter for women and children.
Yeah, Honourable Member, I'm not aware that there is, but we'll bring that back.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to know that there is something in there because, depending on hotels, it is crucial because there's nothing else right now. But we do need to support women and children with programs and services they require. The data that we received last year from Blooming House alone should have been enough for this government to jump and build something. So I'm wondering, this may not be appropriate, Chair, but the capital budget is one of the most important pieces of work that we look at in this House, bringing forth for approval. And it is critically important that we ensure that our budgets align with our values and that they support all Islanders. And so as a critic responsible for the status of women, I would like to know if a gender-based analysis or a diversity analysis was conducted on this capital budget, and wondering if we may get an intervention here.
Honourable Member, through government, we've stressed with all departments that all decisions are made through a gender-based analysis. So.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
It's not enough to just say that. Would you be able to table that document? But before I ask that question, I understand that a gender-based analysis is a huge piece of work, and I appreciate that 100%. And it's not easy, especially with such a big item as a capital budget. And I'm wondering if the Secretariat is equipped with the resources to even do this type of analysis.
That's not really something that we can address here on the floor, but I'm more than happy to reach out and bring that back.
Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Chair. This is certainly something that is relevant to the capital budget, because I would hope that for a government who's been stouting the fact and bragging about the fact that they are using a gender-based analysis lens on things so as important as this, that it would be something that we can discuss absolutely right now. And that you as Finance Minister should know whether a gender-based analysis had been used on this or not, because in order to do that, you would have had to consult with and work with the minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you for that comment, Honourable Member.
Charlottetown Victoria Park. Do you have any further questions?
I would just like to ask the Minister again if that gender-based analysis can indeed be tabled.
I'll reach out to the department and bring it back, whatever we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Cornwall Meadowbank.
Thanks, Chair. I find the conversation intriguing between the opposition and the government in regards to housing. Two members that both live in the city are neglecting to realize that there was over 130 units built in and around Charlottetown. The total past government built 345 units of accommodations. We're still talking about some of them today from the government. And in fact, when I look back and think about it, the opposition was so radiant on this topic that they put $5 million in their platform for housing in the last election. Now you tell me how many buildings you can build for $5 million. But disregarding that, and the question in relevance to children in housing, the establishment built with the previous government and the federal government on Beach Grove Road will be utilized for that. But other than that, I think this government has failed on housing over the past year, and the minister can get up and he can quote numbers and whatever. There was 345 units built by the previous government. Some of them are just coming online, and that's not including the 260 units at the University of Prince Edward Island. So, for opposition or government, I think in a track record of 4 years, I think that's pretty darn good. So I hope that this government can at least try to achieve the minimal of that, and we can overcome some of this housing issues. So I just wanted to state that, but you sit here and you get tired of listening to the numbers being tossed around and the figures, but I think everybody better take a step back and say, well, you know what? Yes, it's still an issue, but give credit where credit's due, because we will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Member.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Chair. So the federal government partnership plan, the budget that's coming, is there any other information that can be passed on about that? Like potential, it's coming up very quickly. What's been submitted for so far, and what's the priorities?
Honourable Member, we don't have that in front of us. What we're looking at now is the numbers that are submitted by Social Development and Housing. For this capital budget, we'll be happy to bring that back.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
You had mentioned before that there was start time lapsed on, I do believe it was the Summerside project. Why was that?
It was due to COVID, I think, Honourable Member.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
But what do you mean, but due to COVID, like, the private sector kept going? Like, what would be more specific reasons?
I can't really comment on that, but again, we'll bring that back.
And I guess I'm just trying to
Charlottetown
figure
West
out.
Royalty?
Sorry, Chair. Is it a human resource issue, or is it, how many other projects were delayed during that COVID time?
I don't have a number in front of me, but we'll make a note of that and see if we can bring back a number for you.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Because there is an awful lot of money left on the table, and the numbers coming out, like we talked about it, between number of builds and rental vouchers is the numbers is getting bigger. The government of Canada, I guess I can't ask that here, but I want to ask about the government of Canada reaching homelessness strategy. Was that another separate program that you're looking into?
That's not something that I can answer to you, Honourable Member, but I'd like to reiterate that we did not leave money on the table. That's not the way it works with the capital budget. We did not leave money on the table. The money that was approved in previous capital budgets for specific projects, if the project did not get to where it was supposed to be in that fiscal year, the money will be pushed forward for the next year. It's not sitting in a bank account somewhere. That's money that we have to go and put against our long-term debt. So if we spend it on something else, which we haven't approved, then we're going to have to find that when we move forward with the project. So nothing was left on the table, Honourable Member.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And I appreciate that, but the crisis is only getting deeper, and we're not performing as a provincial government at this time. And money aside, but we're actually talking about people's lives here, and there's some real issues. So.
I think we've shown that there are a number of housing. There's a number of housing available, whether it's through our own government-owned facilities or through help with rental vouchers. We're willing to work with all aspects of the community on PEI to ensure that we can find housing for people. And I said it earlier and criticized for saying it, but we can always do more. It doesn't matter what department we look at. That is the reality, whether it's health or education. There's always something new that is brought to the forefront, and we continue to work with Islanders to ensure that we can move forward.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate the discussion. The 48 unit in Charlottetown that you had announced, what was that project you have listed?
What I had indicated, there's 48 units to be built in Charlottetown, and they're securing the land, trying to find the solution for the land here in Charlottetown. It's becoming increasingly difficult to find suitable parcels of land. Up until now, they've been relying on inventories of Crown-owned land owned by the Housing Corporation, and they're kind of getting through that stock, so they're looking for the appropriate sites right now.
I know it's
Charlottetown West Royalty. The hour has been called.
Thanks, Gord. Thanks, Gord. Have a good weekend. Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Shall carry. Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House, having under consideration the grant of capital supply to Her Majesty, I beg leave to report the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Morel, Dona, Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from Charlottetown Brighton, that this House adjourn until December. More specifically, December 1st at 2 o'clock in the p.m.
Shall it carry? Well, honourable members, having a lovely weekend. And with my invitations, I'm going to see who the boss is at home. So I'm supposed to be putting up Christmas lights. And now we've got a couple of invitations. So if you don't see me, you found out who the boss was at home.